Please work. Oh, hello. If anybody is here, I don't think it's working yet. I have no idea why. It's not starting my scheduled stream still. I apologize. Bear with me. It is super annoying. But welcome in. Happy Monday. If you are watching this back, I hope you have had a wonderful day. Hope you got everything that you set out to get. And I am happy you're here with us to relax and read. We are getting into our holiday season, so we are shifting into holiday mode. And we're going to start with one of my favorite holiday stories, which is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And it's a relatively short book compared to what we're used to. And should only take about the normal time the stream takes to read the whole thing, so we are going to do that. And they're starting to trickle on over now. I hope you are doing well. It's still doing the thing and not starting my scheduled live, so that's a little annoying. Yep, that is a bit annoying. And not what I wanted to do. Need to come in here. And I'm going to post that link over here. Which stinks, because I had 5, 6 likes, 7 likes over on that side. There we go. Got 3 people there. Oh yeah, just starting, James. Just starting out. I was trying to start my scheduled stream that I had scheduled all day, and for some reason it no longer wants to do that for me. So something between YouTube and Streamlabs is not talking to each other. Additionally, it seems that I'm the only one that's having this problem, so we're just going to go with it. But super appreciate y'all being here. Hope you're doing well, James. It is good to see you, my friend. I'm just fixing to get going here. Into solving some cubes, and we're solving a cube and then jumping right into the story. It is a pretty long story, but no longer than we're used to. But I did want to do a mic check. Is my mic working okay? Can you all hear me? Just let me know. And that's going to do that. I'm going to come over here. Gonna do a quick reload. I'm just trying to get rid of the scheduled one so peeps aren't heading on over into that one. And if any of my mods are here and want to throw it out in the Discord as well, I would certainly appreciate you. Excellent. That's exactly what I wanted to see. Good. Chime in. Want to go to bed. Excellent. Hey, Uncle Kev, bring us everyone else. Leighton, hey. It's good to see you, Leighton. So happy you can join us for story time. How was your day? How was everybody's day? Everybody have a good day? Everybody hear me okay? Is my mic working okay? And yes, we are going to be reading one of my favorite stories of all time, and not just any story, my favorite ghost story of all time, which is Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And yeah, we're going to do the whole thing tonight. So I hope y'all are ready for an adventure because you're about to have one. Philosophy, I am. I hope you are as well. Where's the stream? There we go. Yes, I hope you are as well, my friend. My friend, my brother. I hope you are as well. Doing good, trying to decide when I want to go to bed. Well, typically that decision is pretty easy when we're here and listening to me. People just kind of fall asleep. So, deleted my ghost comment saying YouTube is sussy again. That is a little weird, but I appreciate you, Mystic Star. Yes, had an awesome day today. It's afternoon, tea time here, having banana cake and milk. Let's go. I love it. I'm drinking, I can't even tell you what. I had some coffee, I mixed coffees together, and then I realized I didn't have any sugar, so but that's what we're going with. Give me 1 second here. I'm going to do a quick mic check. All right. And testing, testing. All right, cool. We are good to go. Peppermint peach green tea for me. Excellent. Mike is good. Let's go. Thank you for that, Leighton. Appreciate it. Ooh, forgot to lock my chair. All right, let's get our cube solved. Quite quick today because we are going to read through the whole story that is A Christmas Carol. And let me know if you are familiar with the story. I shouldn't say we all should be because I simply don't know. You might have had different experiences growing up, but everybody is seemingly heard of the story of Ebenezer Scrooge and the Three Ghosts of Christmas. Christmas past, present, and Christmas is yet to come. So I'm just curious, is everybody familiar with that story? Lori, how are you, boo? It's good to see you. Raisins and small Sprite for me. Nothing as scrumptious as you're having. Yeah, no kidding. Although I dare to say, Brangus, as I get older, raisins and a small Sprite honestly sound pretty good too. So, just saying. My raisins sound really good right now. Oh no, what's happening? No, I appreciate everybody being here and ready to rock and listen to some stories. Christmas Carol since I was a kiddo. Ooh, excellent, excellent. Absolute a Christmas classic. Mickey's. I got you. I got you. I mean, I will have to put that in the top realm of funniest typo ever. So we'll just put that in the top realm there, boo. But yeah, Mickey's with Scrooge McDuck, of course, named after Ebenezer Scrooge, the old miser. I made it yesterday for cooking class. Love cooking classes with Nana. I love that. I don't know. Bananas with Nana. I don't know. I think there's a song there. Autocorrect has it out for me. I'll tell you what. Autocorrect is I think it's out for almost everybody. However, it can. What am I doing? I don't even know. I'm excited for the story. And yeah, it's absolutely classic. I will share with you a little bit of history here. Story time during story time. And that is going to be that my father, Papa Ghost, he is very much in love with the story as well. And we've watched quite a few renditions of the story of Scrooge and Ebenezer, and of course there's Bill Murray's Scrooge and Mickey Mouse, and Disney's had it, and of course there's been some plays and also true serious dramas that have been done on it, but there's also been musicals of the sorts. And so what I will say is Albert Finney's Scrooge from way back 60s. Yeah, is our absolute favorite, and it has become tradition here that we watch that every single year, and these songs will get stuck in my head, like so stuck in my head. And then my son was born, and we got him introduced to it. So Nate, he also is in love with the story and in love with the song. So this is really exciting for me because I've only yet but read the book but one time when I was very young, and of course probably didn't translate too well. So I'm excited to read it to y'all now. And me sometimes, yeah. He gets us all in the worst, the worst ways, all the worst times for sure. Move that away. Bring that down. I don't know why this is particularly difficult for me right now. It's because I'm not focusing. That would be the why. All right. Get this in. This is also giving my Kindle a little more time to charge it because classic Kev. Forgot to charge the Kindle. There we go. Moving it this way. Purple Moon. It's good to see you. Yeah, autocorrect turn. Yeah, yeah, see? Exactly. Autocorrect. It's got definitely got it out. Ooh, okay. We've got one of those unique where this side and this side match. So we get to do our cool little. There we go. Get them all matched. That matches too. That's pretty nice. No skips for Kev. Gotta take the long way around, they said. Can't cut corners, they said. That's alright. I got no problem doing things the right way the first time, even though that was definitely not the first time. Leighton, are you going to learn sewing as well? This is a great talent to have. I learned in the military, and it saved me many, many times. I agree. It is a very good skill to have. Even so much as knowing how to refasten a button can save so many things. Well, 8 people here. All right, excellent. Really looking forward to this. So that brings us to our story here. Let's see where that Kindle ended up. I need a name for my Kindle. Yep. Anybody who knows the the value of a button and even why I like bonus points when I buy shirts and they come with extra buttons. Ghost, name it that. Ghost. I could name my Kindle Ghost. Although it is small, it's like a little mini fire. Fire Ghost. Hmm. Are there any Fire Ghost Pokemon out there? In fact, I think Hisuian Typhlosion is a Fire Ghost Pokemon. Kevdal. Bonus points for creativity, Rafa. Okay. She's ready for story time, too. She's going to be snoring in no time. Everything's just getting all warmed up here. Yes, sir, I have been. We need to learn sewing for many reasons. We also do weaving and other cultural traditions as part of life. Weaving is super cool. You mean in the likes of like baskets and furniture and things as such? Because that's admirable indeed. That is a beautiful life skill. All right, come on, Kindle. Again, appreciate y'all being here. When I use the microphone, I like to use the headset for reading because my voice comes through clearer. But I realized that I had to lose the music when I do that, so I apologize. Or name it Chaos for that good chaos. Okay, I could name it Chaos because it always seems like an hour before I go live, I'm always like, huh, I wonder if I charge the Kindle. And I'll go look, and it's like 0. No, I didn't. Okay. And this is an old piece of machinery here, so it very slow. I should just reset it, is what I should do. Especially flax plants here. Okay. I know that flax seed is certainly something that um, people eat, and it's good for you, I hear. All right. Come on. Do my Kindle open dance. Welcome, welcome. Got 9 people in here ready to go. Appreciate everybody smashing the like button. I know that this is the second time that you've probably had to hit the button. And yes, we are all done with Halloween, Masks of the Red Deaths. That was a good reading last time. I really enjoyed some of those stories from Edgar Allan Poe. Oh, no, no, I don't need to do that. I need to do this. Please open. Ten people. And about 15 minutes afterward, I'll be more prepared next time, y'all. I promise. And if there's any holiday stories that you would like me to read, and any recommendations that you have, make sure you jump in the Discord. You can exclamation point Discord if you're live in the chat and jump in if you do have a story that you'd like me to read. It does have to be super old, so it's in the public domain. But yeah, I would love to read as many holiday stories as I can between now and New Year. You can call it your book. Let's open up the book. All right. That quickly went to number 1. All right. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started so we can get through the book and the entire story here. All good. Just having a small chat session of therapy. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I thought that too. Before the reading streams came along, I'd had this concept of literally just sitting here and seeing how people are doing and asking them, if they need advice on anything. So, but it quickly turned into I can do that all the time on any stream. So, all right, let's rock to it. I'm going to read the preface by Mr. Charles Dickens himself. And it says, I have endeavored in this ghostly little book to raise the ghost of an idea, which shall not put my readers out of humour with themselves, with each other, with the season, or with me. May it haunt their houses pleasantly, and no one wish to lay it. Their faithful friend and servant, C.B., December 1843. So, in short, he does not want to make fun of anybody for any reason, for anything. It's all in good humor, and it's a pleasant story. This even has some of the original illustrations from the book from that time ago. And I'm going to do my best to show you those pictures when they do come up. But we are going to get into Stav 1, or Chapter 1, Marley's Ghost. Sewing and weaving for traditional fishing ropes, traps, and I was learning last week with my uncle and 2 cousins. Let's go. That's awesome. That's awesome, Leighton. You're so cool. I want to be like Leighton when I grow up. Marley's Ghost. Marley was dead, to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. The register of this burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it, and Scrooge's name was good upon change for anything he chose to put his hand to. Old Marley was as dead as a doornail. Mind, I don't mean to say that I know, of my own knowledge, what there is particularly dead about a doornail. I might have been inclined myself to regard a coffin nail as the deadliest piece of ironmongery in the trade, but the wisdom of our ancestors is in the simile, and my unhallowed hand shall not disturb it, or the country's done for. You will therefore permit me to repeat, emphatically, that Marley was as dead as a doornail. Scrooge knew he was dead. Of course he did. How could it be otherwise? Scrooge and he were partners for I don't know how many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole assign, his sole residuary legatee, his sole friend and sole mourner. And even Scrooge was not so dreadfully cut up by this sad event, and that he was an excellent man of business on the very day of the funeral, and solemnized with it the undoubted bargain. The mention of Marley's funeral brings me back to the point I started from. There is no doubt that Marley was dead. This must be distinctly understood, or nothing wonderful can come of the story I am going to relate. If we were not perfectly convinced that Hamlet's father died before the play began, there would be nothing more remarkable in taking a stroll that night, in an easterly wind upon his own ramparts, than there would be in any other middle-aged gentleman rashly turning out after dark in a breezy spot. Say St. Paul's churchyard, for instance, literally to astonish his son's weak mind. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood, years afterward, above the warehouse door, Scrooge and Marley. The firm was known as Scrooge and Marley. Sometimes people knew to the business called Scrooge, and sometimes Marley. But he answered to both names. It was all the same to him. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge, and squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever been struck out, generous fire, secret, and self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheeks, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. A frosty rime was on his head and on his elbows, and his weary chin. He carried his own low temperature always about with him. He iced his office in the dog days, and didn't thaw in 1 degree at Christmas. External heat and cold had little influence on Scrooge. No warmth could warm, nor wintry chill weather chill him. No wind that blew was bitterer than he. No falling snow was more intent upon its purpose. No pelting rain less open to entreaty. Foul weather didn't know where to have him. The heaviest rain and snow and hail and sleet could boast of an advantage over him in only one respect. They often came down, handsomely, and Scrooge never did. Nobody ever stopped him in the street to say, with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle, no child asked him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such a place of Scrooge. Even the blind men's dog appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming would tug their owners into doorways and up courts, and then would wag their tails as though they said, "No eye at all is better than the evil eye, Dark Master." But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked, to edge his way along the crowded paths of life. Warning all human sympathy to keep its distance was what the knowing ones called nuts to Scrooge. Once upon a time, of all the good days of the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy in his counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather, foggy withal, and he could hear the people in the court outside go wheezing up and down. beating their hands upon their breasts and stamping their feet upon the pavement stone to warm them. The city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day, and candles were flaring in the windows of the neighboring offices, like ruddy smears upon the palpable brown air. The fog came pouring in at every chink and hole, and it was so dense without that, although the court was of the narrowest, the houses opposite were mere phantoms. To see the dingy cloud come drooping down, obscuring everything, one might have thought that nature lived hard by, and was brewing on a large scale. The door of Scrooge's counting-house was open that he might keep his eye upon his clerk, who, in a dismal little cell beyond, a sort of tank, was copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one coal. But he couldn't replenish it, for Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room. And so surely as the clerk came in with the shovel, the master predicted it would be necessary for them to part. Wherefore the clerk put on his white comforter and tried to warm himself at the candle, in which effort, not being a man of strong imagination, he failed. "A Merry Christmas, Uncle! God save you!" cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew, who came upon him so quickly that this was the first imitation he had of his approach. "Ah!" said Scrooge, "humbug!" But he had so heated himself with rapidly walking in the fog and frost, his nephew of Scrooge, that he was all in a glow. His face was ruddy and handsome, his eyes sparkled, and his breath smoked again. "Christmas a humbug, Uncle?" said Scrooge's nephew. "You don't mean that, I'm sure." "I do," said Scrooge. "Merry Christmas. What right have you to be merry?" "What reason have you to be merry?" "You're poor enough." "Come then," returned the nephew gaily. "What right have you to be so dismal? What reason have you to be morose? You're rich enough." Scrooge, having no better answer ready of the spur of the moment, said, "Bah!" again followed it up with "humbug." "Don't be cross, Uncle," said the nephew. "What else can I be?" returned the uncle. "When I live in such a world of fools as this, Merry Christmas." "Out upon Merry Christmas! What Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older and not an hour richer? A time for the balancing your book and having every item in 'em, though a rounded dozen a month, presented dead against you?" "If I could work my will," said Scrooge indignantly, "every idiot that goes on with Merry Christmas on its lips should be boiled with his own pudding, and buried with the stake of the holly through his heart, he should." "Uncle!" pleaded the nephew. "Nephew," returned the uncle sternly, "keep Christmas in your own way, and let me keep it in mine." "Keep it?" repeated Scrooge's nephew. "But you don't keep it." "Let me leave it alone, then," said Scrooge. "Much good may it do you, much good it has ever done you." "There are many things from which I might have derived good by which I have not profited, dare I say," returned the nephew. "Christmas among the rest. But I am sure I have always thought of Christmas time, when it has come around, apart from the veneration due to its sacred name and origin, if anything belonging to it can be apart from that, as a good time and kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in a long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open their shut-up hearts freely and to think of people below them as if they were really fellow passengers to the grave, and not another race of creatures bound on by journey. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good, and I say, God bless it." The clerk in the tank involuntarily applauded. Becoming immediately sensible of the impropriety, he poked at the fire and extinguished the last frail spark forever. "Let me hear another sound from you," said Scrooge, "and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your situation. You're quite a powerful speaker, sir," he added, turning to his nephew. I wonder you don't go into Parliament." Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow. Scrooge said that he would see him. Yes, indeed he did. He went the whole length of the expression, and said that he would see him in the extremity first. "But why?" cried Scrooge's nephew. "Why?" "Why did you get married?" said Scrooge. "Because I fell in love." "Because you fell in love?" growled Scrooge, as if it were the only thing in the world more ridiculous than a Merry Christmas. "Good afternoon." "Nay, uncle, but you never came to see me before that happened. Why give it as a reason for not coming now?" "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "I want nothing from you. I ask nothing from you. Why can't we be friends?" "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "I'm sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute. You have never had any quarrel, to which I have been a party, but I have made the trial in homage to Christmas, and I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So, a Merry Christmas, Uncle." "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. "And a Happy New Year." "Good afternoon," said Scrooge. His nephew left the room without an angry word, notwithstanding he stopped at the outer door and bestowed the greetings of the season on the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned them cordially. "There's another fellow," muttered Scrooge, who overheard him. "My clerk, with 15 shillings a week, and a wife and family, talking about a Merry Christmas. I'll retire Bedlam. I'll retire to Bedlam." This lunatic, in letting Scrooge's nephew out, had let 2 other people in. They were portly gentlemen, pleasant to behold, and stood now, with their hats off, in Scrooge's office. They had books and papers in their hands, and bowed to him. "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe," said one of the gentlemen, referring to his list. "Have the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?" "Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years," Scrooge replied. "He died 7 years ago, this very night." We have no doubt his liberal, liberality is well represented by his surviving partner, and the gentleman presenting his credentials." "Sorry," said the gentleman, presenting his credentials. It certainly was, for they had 2 kindred spirits. At the ominous word, liberality, Scrooge frowned, and shook his head, and handed the credentials back. "At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge," said the gentleman, taking up a pen, "it is more than usual desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute who suffer greatly at the present time. Many thousands are in want common necessities. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir." "Are there no prisons?" asked Scrooge. "Plenty of prisons," said the gentleman, laying down the pen again. "And the Union workhouses?" demanded Scrooge. "Are they still in operation?" "They are still," returned the gentleman. "I wish I could say they were not." "The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigor, then?" said Scrooge. "Both very busy, sir." "Oh, I was afraid, from what you said at first, that something had occurred to stop them in their useful course," said Scrooge. "I'm very glad to hear it." "Under the impression that they are scarcely furnish Christian cheer of mind or body to the multitude," returned the gentleman, "a few of us are endeavoring to raise a fund to buy the poor some meat and drink. This means of warmth we chose this time because it is a time, of all others, we want is keenly felt, and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for?" "Nothing," Scrooge replied. "You wish to be anonymous?" "I wish to be left alone," said Scrooge. "Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I hope to support the establishments I have mentioned. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there." "Many can't go there, and many would rather die." "If they would rather die," said Scrooge, "they had better do it and decrease the surplus population. Besides, excuse me, I don't know that." "But you might know it," observed the gentleman. "It's not my business," Scrooge returned. "It's enough for a man to understand his own business, and not to interfere with other people's. Mine occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen." Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentleman withdrew. Scrooge resumed his labors with an improved opinion of himself, and in a more factitious temper than was usual with him. I'm gonna take a pause. Hey, Mama Ghost, how's it going? Rafa, Matt, hello. It's good to see you, brother. Hope everyone is doing well. Me and the wifey got you on the big TV in the other room. Let's go. Appreciate you, Mew. On a mix of names, it is not fully sure. Excellent, excellent. It is good to see you, Mama Ghost. I hope you're doing well tonight. We're just reading A Christmas Carol, all about Scrooge. And we're just now having that whole realization that Scrooge isn't the nicest guy. Bear with me 1 second, y'all. I'm going to refill my coffee real quick. It's actually quite funny reading through the book. It follows the movie that I like really, really well, down to the very word. Save for the narrator. There's not really a narrator within the story in that movie. Anyhow. All right, getting back into it. I'm doing all right. Doing all right. I love Mondays when I get to read with y'all. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened so that people ran about with flaring links, proffering their services to go before horses and carriages and conduct them on their way. The ancient tower of a church, whose gruff old bell was always peeping slyly, it's a weird way to spell it, down at Scrooge out of the Gothic window in the wall, became invisible and struck the hours and quarters at the clouds with tumultuous vibrations afterwards, as if its teeth were chattering in its frozen head up there. The cold became intense. In the main street, at the corner of the court, some laborers were repairing the gas pipes and had lighted a great fire in a brazier, round which a party of ragged men and boys were gathered, warming their hands and winking their eyes before the blaze in rapture. The water plug, being left in solitude, was overflowing, suddenly congealed, and turned to a misanthropic ice. The brightness of the shops, where holly sprigs and berries crackled in the lamp heat of the windows, made pale faces ruddy as they passed. Poulterers and grocers' trades became a splendid joke, a glorious pageant, with which it was next to impossible to believe that such dull principles as bargain and sale had anything to do. The Lord Mayor, in the stronghold of the mighty mansion house, gave orders to his 50 cooks and butlers to keep Christmas as a Lord Mayor's household should, and even the little tailor, whom he had fined 5 shillings on the previous Monday for being drunk and bloodthirsty in the street, stirred up tomorrow's pudding in his garret, while his lean wife and the baby sallied out to buy the beef. Foggier yet, and colder, piercing, searching, biting cold. If the good Saint Dunstan had but nipped the evil spirit's nose with a touch of such weather as that, instead of using his familiar weapons, then indeed it would have roared to lusty purpose. The owner of one scant young nose gnawed and mumbled by the hungry cold, and bones are gnawed by dogs, stooped down at Scrooge's keyhole to regale him with a Christmas carol. But at the first sound of "God bless you, merry gentlemen, may nothing you dismay," Scrooge seized the ruler with such energy of action that the singer fled in terror, leaving the keyhole to the fog and even more congenial frost. At length the hour of shutting up the counting house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge dismounted from his stool and tactfully admitted the fact that the expectant clerk in the tank, who instantly snuffed out his candle and put on his hat. "You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose," said Scrooge. "If quite convenient, sir." "It's not convenient," said Scrooge, "and it's not fair. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used. I'll be bound." The clerk smiled faintly. "And yet," said Scrooge, "you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work." The clerk observed that it was only once a year. "A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December," said Scrooge, buttoning his great coat to the chin. "But I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier the next morning." The clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no great coat, went down a slide on Cornhill, at the end of the lane of boys 20 times, in honor of his being Christmas Eve, and then ran home to Camden Town as hard as he could pelt to pay a blind man's bluff. To play at blind man's bluff. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers, and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's books, went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were gloomy suite of rooms in a lowering pile of building up a yard. Piling of building up a yard, where it was so little business to be, that one could scarcely help fancying it might have run there when it was a young house, playing at hide and seek with other houses, and had forgotten the way out again. It was old enough now, and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge, the other rooms being all let out as offices, and yards was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, had feigned to grope with his hands. The fog and frost so hung about the black old gateway of the house that it seemed as if the genius of the weather sat mournful meditation on the threshold. Now, it is a fact that there was nothing at all peculiar about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during his whole residence in that place. Also that Scrooge had a little of what is called fancy about him in any man of the city of London, even including, which is a bold word, the corporation, aldermen, and livery. Let it also be borne to mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley since his last mention of his 7 years dead partner, that afternoon. And then let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without its undergoing any immediate process of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face. It was not an impenetrable shadow as the other objects in the yard were, but had a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious, but looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with ghostly spectacles turned up upon his ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred, as if by breath or hot air, and though the eyes were open, they were perfectly motionless. That, and its livid color, made it horrible, but its horror seemed to be in spite of the face and beyond its control, rather than a part of its own expression. As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. To say that he was not startled, or that his blood was not conscious of a terrible sensation to which it had been stranger from infancy, would be untrue. But he put his hand upon the key he had relinquished, turned it sturdily, walked in, and lighted his candle. He did pause, with a moment's irresolution, before he shut the door. And he did look cautiously behind it at first, as if he half expected it to be terrified with the sight of Marley's pigtails sticking out into the hall. But there was nothing on the back of the door, except the screws and nuts that held the knocker on. So he said, "Pooh, pooh," and closed it with a bang. The sound resounded through the house like thunder. Every room above and every cask in the wine merchant's cellars below appeared to have a separate peal of echoes of its own. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He fastened the door. He walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly, too, trimming his candle as he went. You may talk vaguely about driving a coat and six up a good old flight of stairs or through a bad young Act of Parliament, but I mean to say you might have got a hearse up that staircase and taken it broadwise with the splinter bar towards the wall and the door towards the balustrades, and done it easy. There was plenty of width for that, and room to spare, which is perhaps the reason why Scrooge thought he saw a locomotive hearse going on before him in the gloom. Half a dozen gas lamps out of the street would have lighted the entry too well, so you may suppose that it was pretty dark with Scrooge's dip. Up Scrooge went, not caring a button for that. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see that all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that. Sitting room, bedroom, lumber room, all as they should be. Nobody under the table, nobody under the sofa. A small fire in the grate, spoon in basin ready, and the little saucepan of gruel. Scrooge had a cold in his head, upon the hob. Nobody under the bed, nobody in the closet, nobody in his dressing gown, which was hanging up in a suspicious attitude against the wall. Lumber room as usual, old fire guard, old shoes, two fish baskets, washing stand on three legs, and a poker. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in, double locked himself in, which was not his custom. Thus secured against surprise, he took off his cravat, put on his dressing gown and slippers, and his nightcap, and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. It was a very low fire indeed, nothing on such a bitter night. He was obliged to sit close to it, abroad over it, and brood over it, before he could extract at last a sensation of warmth from such a handful of fuel. The fireplace was an old one, built by some Dutch merchant long ago, and paved all around with quaint Dutch tiles, designed to illustrate the Scriptures. There were Cains and Abels, Pharaoh's daughters, queens of Sheba, angelic messengers descending through the air on clouds like feather beds, Abraham's, Belzahars, apostles putting off to sea in butter boats, hundreds of figures to attract his thoughts. And yet that face of Marley, 7 years dead, came like the ancient prophet's rod and swallowed up the whole. If each smooth tile had been a blank at first, with power to shape some picture on its surface from the disjointed fragments of his thoughts, there would have been a copy of old Marley's head on every one. "Humbug," said Scrooge, and walked across the room. After several turns, he sat down again. As he threw his head back in the chair, his glance happened to rest upon a bell, a disused bell, that hung in the room and communicated for some purpose now forgotten with the chamber in the highest story of the building. It was with great astonishment and with strange, inexplicable dread that as he looked, he saw this bell began to swing, and swung so softly in the onset that it scarcely made a sound. But soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This might have lasted half a minute or a minute, but it seemed an hour. The bells ceased as they had begun together. They were succeeded by a clanking noise, deep down below, as if some person were dragging a heavy chain over the casks in the wine merchant's cellar. Scrooge then remembered to have heard that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. The cellar door flew open with a booming sound, and then he heard the noise much louder, on the floors below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards the door. "It's humbug still," said Scrooge. "I won't believe it." His color changed, though, when, without a pause, it came on through the heavy door and passed into the room before his eyes. Upon its coming in, the dying flame leapt up as though it cried, "I know him! Marley's ghost!" and fell again. The same face, the very same. Marley in his pigtail, usual waistcoat, tights and boots and tassels on the latter bristling like his pigtail, and his coat skirts, and the hair upon his head, the chain he drew was clasped about his middle. It was long and wound about him like a tail, and it was made, for Scrooge observed it closely, of cash boxes, keys, padlocks, ledgers, deeds, and heavy purses wrought in steel. His body was transparent, so that Scrooge, observing him, and looking through his waistcoat, could see the 2 buttons on his coat behind. Scrooge had often heard it said that Marley had no bowels, that he had never believed it until now. No, nor did he believe it even now. Though he looked at the phantom through and through and saw it standing before him, though he felt the chilling influence of his death-cold eyes and marked the very texture of the folded kerchief bound about his head and chin, with wrapper he had not observed before. Which wrapper he had not observed before, he was still incredulous, and fought against his senses. "How now?" said Scrooge, caustic and cold as ever. "What do you want with me?" "Much." Marley's voice was no doubt about it. "Who are you?" "Ask me who I was." "Who were you, then?" said Scrooge, raising his voice. "You're particular, for a shade." He was going to say "to a shade," but substituted this as more appropriate. "In life I was your partner, Jacob Marley." Can you sit down?" asked Scrooge, looking doubtfully at him. "I can." "Do it, then." Scrooge asked the question because he didn't know whether a ghost so transparent might find himself in a condition to take a chair, and felt that in the event of his being impossible, it might involve the necessity of an embarrassing explanation. But the ghost sat down on the opposite side of the fireplace, as if he were quite used to it. "You don't believe in me," observed the ghost. "I don't," said Scrooge. "What evidence would you have of my reality beyond that of your senses?" "I don't know," said Scrooge. "Why do you doubt your senses?" "Because," said Scrooge, "a little thing affects them. A slight disorder of the stomach makes them cheats. You may be an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of an undone potato. There is more gravy than of grave about you, whatever you are." Scrooge was not much in the habit of cracking jokes, nor did he feel in his heart by any means waggish then. The truth is that he tried to be smart, as a means of distracting his own attention, and keeping down his terror, for the spectre's voice disturbed the very marrow in his bones. To sit staring at those fixed, glazed eyes, in silence for a moment, would play, Scrooge felt, the very deuce with him. There was something very awful, too, in the spectre's being provided with the infernal atmosphere of its own. Scrooge could not feel it himself, but this was clearly the case, for though the ghost sat perfectly motionless, its hair, and skirts, and tassels were all agitated by the hot vapors from an oven. "Do you see this toothpick?" said Scrooge, returning quickly to the change for a reason just assigned, and wishing, though it were only for a second, to divert the vision's stony gaze from himself. "I do," replied the ghost. "You're not looking at it," said Scrooge. "But I see it," said the ghost, notwithstanding. "Well," returned Scrooge, "I have but to swallow this and be, for the rest of my days, persecuted by the latent of goblins, all of my own creation. Humbug, I tell you, humbug!" At this the spirit raised a frightful cry. and shook his chains with such dismal and appalling noise that Scrooge held on tight to his chair to save himself from falling in a swoon. But how much greater was his horror when the phantom, taking off the bandage round his head, as if it were too warm to wear indoors, his lower jaw dropped down upon his breast. Scrooge fell upon his knees and clasped his hands before his face. "Mercy!" he said. "Dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?" "Man of a worldly mind," replied the ghost, "do you believe in me or not?" "I do," said Scrooge. "I must. But why do spirits walk the earth? And why do they come unto me?" "It is required of every man," the ghost returned, "that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men, and travel far and wide. And if that spirit goes not forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is doomed to wander through the world, oh, woe's me, and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth, and turned to happiness." Again the spectre raised a cry and shook his chain and wrung his shadowy hands. "You are fettered," said Scrooge, trembling. "Tell me why." "I wear the chain I forged in life," replied the ghost. "I made it link by link and yard by yard. I girded it on of my own free will, and of my own free will I wore it. As its pattern strange to you?" Scrooge trembled more and more. "Or would you know," pursued the ghost, "the weight and length of the strong coil you could bear yourself? It was full as heavy as it is long as this, 7 Christmas Eves ago. You have labored on it since. It is a ponderous chain." Scrooge glanced about him on the floor in the expectation of finding himself surrounded by some 50 or 60 fathoms of iron cable, but he could see nothing. "Jacob," he said imploringly. "Old Jacob Marley, tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Jacob." "I have none to give," the ghost replied. "It comes from other regions, Ebenezer Scrooge. It is conveyed by other ministers to other kinds of men, nor can I tell you what I would. A very little more is all permitted to me. I cannot rest, I cannot stay, I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house. Mark me. In life my spirit never roved beyond the narrow limits of our money-changing hole, and weary journeys lie before me." It was a habit with Scrooge, whenever he became thoughtful, to put his hands in his breeches pockets. Pondering on what the ghost had said, he did so now, but without lifting his eyes or getting off his knees. "You must have been very slow about it, Jacob," Scrooge observed in a businesslike manner, though with humility and deference. "Slow?" the ghost repeated. "7 years dead," mused Scrooge, "and traveling all the time?" "The whole time," said the ghost. "No rest, no peace, incessant torture of remorse." "You travel fast?" said Scrooge. "On the wings of the wind," replied the ghost. You might have got over a great quantity of ground in 7 years," said Scrooge. The ghost, on hearing this, set up another cry and clanked his chain so hideously in the dead silence of the night that the ward would have been justified in indicting it for a nuisance. "Oh, O captive bound in double iron," cried the phantom, "not to know that ages of incessant labor by immortal creatures for this earth must pass into entity before the good of which it is susceptible is all developed. Not to know that any Christian spirit working kindly in this little sphere, whatever it may be, will find its mortal life too short for his vast means of usefulness. Not to know that no space of regret can make amends for one's life opportunities misused. Yet such was I, oh, such was I." "But you were always a good man of business, Jacob," faltered Scrooge, who now began to apply this to himself. "Business?" cried the ghost, wringing his hands again. "Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy,
forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehension oceans of my business. It held up its chain at arm's length as if it were the cause of all its unavailing grief, and flung it heavily upon the ground again. At this time of the rolling year, the spectre said, I suffer most. Why did I walk through the crowds of the fellow beings with my eyes turned down and never raise them to that blessed star which led the wise men to the poor abode? Where there no poor homes to which this delight would have conducted me. Scrooge was very much dismayed to hear the spectre going on at this rate, and began to quake exceedingly. Hear me, cried the ghost. My time is nearly gone. I will, said Scrooge. But don't be hard upon me. Don't be fowlery, Jacob, pray. How it is that I appear before you in a shape that you can see, I may not tell. I have sat invisible beside you many and many a day. It was not an agreeable idea. Scrooge shivered and wiped the perspiration from his brow. That is no light part of my penance, pursued the ghost. I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and a hope of escaping my fate, a chance and hope of procuring Ebenezer. You're always a good friend to me, said Scrooge. Thank you. You will be haunted, resumed the ghost, by 3 spirits. Scrooge's countenance fell almost as low as the ghost's had done. Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob? He demanded in a faltering voice. It is. I think I'd rather not, said Scrooge. Without their visits, said the ghost, you cannot hope to shun the path I tread. Expect the first tomorrow when the bell tolls 1. Couldn't I take them all at once? Have it over, Jacob, hinted Scrooge. Expect the second on the next night at the same hour, and the third upon the next night when the last stroke of 12 has ceased to vibrate. Look to see me no more, and look that for your own sake you remember what has passed between us. When it had said these words, the spectre took its wrapper from the table, and bound it around his head. As before, Scrooge knew this by the smart sound his teeth made when his jaws were brought together by the bandage. He ventured to raise his eyes again, and found his supernatural visitor confronting him in an erect attitude, with his chain wound over and about its arm. The apparition walked backwards from him, and at every step it took, the window raised itself a little, so that when the spectre reached it, it was wide open. It beckoned Scrooge to approach, which he did. When they were within 2 paces of each other, Marley's ghost held up his hand, warning him to come no nearer. Scrooge stopped. Not so much in obedience as in surprise and fear, for on the rising of the hand he became sensible and confused. Noises in the air, incoherent sounds of lamentation and regret, wailings of inexpressibly sorrowful and self-accusatory. The spectre, after listening for a moment, joined in the mournful dirge and floated out upon the bleak, dark night. Scrooge followed to the window. Desperate in his curiosity, he looked out. The air was filled with phantoms wandering hither and thither in restless haste, and moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains like Marley's ghost. Some few, they might have been guilty governments, were linked together. None were free. Many had been personally known to Scrooge in their lives. He had been quite familiar with one old ghost, in a white waistcoat, with a monstrous iron safe attached to his ankle, who cried pitilessly, and being unable to assist the wretched woman with an infant, whom it saw below, upon a doorstep. A misery with them all was clearly that they sought to interfere for good in human matters, and had lost the power forever. Whether these creatures faded into mist or mist enshrouded them, he could not tell, but they and their spirit voices faded together, and the night became as it has been when he walked home. Scrooge closed the window and examined the door by which the ghost had entered. It was double locked, as he had locked it with his own hands, and the bolts were undisturbed. He tried to say "humbug," but stopped at first syllable, and being, from the emotion he had undergone, or the fatigue of the day, or his glimpse of the invisible world, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, much in need of repose, he went straight to bed, without undressing, and fell asleep in an instant. That was the end of chapter 1. So sorry, y'all. These chapters get pretty intense. Stafford, fun fact no one asked for. My favorite Christmas movie is Mickey's Christmas Carol. That is all. Extra avocado. I hope you're doing well. I think Lori mentioned that not too long ago. Appreciate that. Adam Jones, how's it going? It's good to see you. Ripping and fishing. Welcome in, Stafford. It's good to see you, brother. Mrs. 5150, always good to see you. Got 16 likes so far. Got 10 of y'all in here listening to my ghost story. Good day, not at work, so I just made a small video about a subject that means a lot to me, just uploading it. Let's go, Adam Jones. The Rock, how you doing, buddy? It's good to see you. I have this little bug pestering me right now. I don't know how he got in or why he's bugging me, but he keeps like kissing my forehead. Ancient Mew, always good to see you. Good story times, so all is good. Christina Slankard, it's good to see you. Hope you and I are doing well. We're here to listen to you read. Excellent. Appreciate that. Hope you're all enjoying the story so far. So would that freak you all out? Have a ghost show up with chains around him saying these are the chains we forged in life. Anybody wonder how long your chain would be? I hope we get to see it because in the movies we do. So always good. Excellent. Glad to hear that. We're going to get into chapter 2, which is the first of these 3 spirits. And I'd like to thank you all for joining me again. I am turning into the pokey ghost of Christmas past, present, and Christmas is yet to come. Just bear with me 1 second while I make sure everything is good. There we go. All is well. Sweet. Nope, didn't miss much. We're just getting into the first ghost. So far at the edge of my seat. Let's go, Raph. I love the story. Awesome, Mama Ghost. JB's Pokestop. It's good to see you, brother. Got 12 people in here. 18 likes. Let's go. Getting into Staff 2, Chapter 2, the first of the 3 spirits. When Scrooge awoke, it was so dark that, looking out of bed, he could scarcely distinguish the transparent window from the opaque walls of his chamber. He was endeavoring to pierce the darkness with his ferret eyes, when the chimes of the neighboring church struck the 4 quarters. So he listened for the hour. To his great astonishment, the heavy bell went on from 6 to 7, and from 7 to 8, and regularly up to 12, then stopped. 12. It was past 2 when he went to bed. The clock was wrong. An icicle must have gotten to the works. 12? He touched the spring of his repeater to correct his most prosperous clock. Its rapid little pulse beat 12 and stopped. Why, it is impossible, said Scrooge. That I can have slept through a whole day and far into another night? It is impossible that anything has happened to the sun. And this is 12 at noon? The idea being an alarming one, he scrambled out of bed and groped his way to the window. He was obliged to rub the frost off with the sleeve of his dressing gown before he could see anything, and could see very little then. All he could make out was that it was still very foggy and extremely cold, and that there was no noise of people running to and fro, and making a great stir, as there unquestionably would have been if night had beaten off bright day, and taken possession of the world. This was great relief because 3 days after the sight of his first exchange paid to Mr. Ebenezer Scrooge or his order and so forth would have become a mere United States security if there were no days to count by. Scrooge went to bed again and thought and thought and thought it over and over and over and could make nothing of it. The more he thought, the more perplexed he was, and the more he endeavored not to think, the more he thought. Marley's ghost bothered him exceedingly. After time, he resolved within himself, after mature inquiry, that it was all a dream. His mind flew back again like a strong spring released to his first position and presented all the same problem to be worked all through. Was it a dream or not? Scrooge lay in this state until the chimes had gone 3/4 more, when he remembered on the sudden that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1. He resolved to lie awake until the hour was past, and considering that he could no more go to sleep than go to heaven, this was perhaps the wisest resolution in his power. The quarter was so long that he was more than once convinced that he may have sunk into a doze unconsciously, and missed the clock. At length it broke upon his listening ear. Ding dong. "A quarter past," said Scrooge, counting. "Ding dong." "Half past," said Scrooge. "Ding dong." "A quarter to it," said Scrooge. "Ding dong." "The hour itself," said Scrooge triumphantly, "and nothing else." He spoke before the hour bell sounded, which it now did with a deep, dull, hollow, melancholy 1. Light flashed up in the room upon the instant, and the curtains of his bed were drawn. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, I tell you, by a hand, not the curtains at his feet, nor the curtains at his back, but those to which his face were addressed. The curtains of his bed were drawn aside, and Scrooge, starting up into a half recumbent attitude, found himself face to face with an unearthly visitor, who drew them as close to it as I am now to you, and I am standing in the spirit at your elbow. It was a strange figure, like a child, yet not so like a child as like an old man, viewed through some supernatural medium, which gave him the appearance of having receded from the view, and being diminished to a child's proportions. Its hair, which hung about its neck and down his back, was white as if with age, and yet the face had not a wrinkle in it, and the tenderest bloom was on the skin. The arms were very long and muscular, the hands the same, as if its hold were of uncommon strength. Its legs and feet, most delicately formed, were, like those upper members, bare. It wore a tunic of the purest white, and round its waist was bound a lustrous belt, the sheen of which was beautiful. It held a branch of fresh green holly in his hands, and, in a single contradiction of that wintry emblem, and its dress trimmed with summer flowers. But the strangest thing about it was that from the crown of its head were sprung a bright clear jet of light, by which all this was visible, and which was doubtless the occasion of its using in its duller moments a great extinguisher for a cap, which it now held under its arm. Even this, though, when Scrooge looked at it with increasing steadiness, was not its strangest quality, for as its belt sparkled and glittered now in one part and now in another, and what was light one instant and another time was dark, so the figure itself fluctuated in its distinctness, being now a thing with one arm, now with one leg, now with 20 legs, now with a pair of legs without a head, now with a head without a body, of which dissolving parts no outline would be visible in the dense gloom wherein they melted away. And in a very wonder of this, it would be itself again, distinct and clear as ever. "Are you a spirit, sir, whose coming was foretold to me?" asked Scrooge. "I am." The voice was soft and gentle, singularly low, as if instead of being so close beside him, it were in a distance. "Who and what are you?" Scrooge demanded. "I am the ghost of Christmas past." "Long past?" inquired Scrooge, observant of his dwarfish nature. "No, your past." Perhaps Scrooge could not have told anybody why, if anybody could have asked him, but he had a special desire to see the spirit in his cap, and begged him to be covered. And begged him to be covered. "What?" exclaimed the ghost. "Would you so soon put out with worldly hands the light I give? It is not enough that you are one of those whose passions made this cap, and forced me through the whole trains of years to wear it low upon my brow." Scrooge reverently disclaimed all intention to offend, or any knowledge of having wilfully bonneted the spirit at any period in his life. He then made bold to inquire what business brought him there. "Your welfare," said the ghost. Scrooge expressed himself much obliged, but could not help thinking that a night of unbroken rest would have been more conducive to that end. The spirit must have heard him thinking, for it said immediately, "Your reclamation, then, take heed." It put out its strong hand as it spoke, and clasped him gently by the arm. "Rise and walk with me." It would have been in vain for Scrooge to plead that the weather and the hour were not adapted to pedestrian purposes, that his bed was warm, that bed was warm, and the thermometer a long way below freezing, that he was clad but lightly in his slippers, dressing gown, and nightcap, and that he had a cold upon him at the time. The grasp, though gentle as a woman's hand, was not to be resisted. He rose, but finding that the spirit made towards the window, clasped his robe in supplication. "I am a mortal," Scrooge remonstrated, "and liable to fall." "Bear but touch of my hand, and there," said the spirit, laying it upon his heart, "and you shall be upheld in more than this." As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road, with fields in either hands. The city had entirely vanished, not a vestige of it to be seen. The darkness and the mist had vanished with it, for it was a clear, cold winter day with snow upon the ground. "Good heavens!" said Scrooge, clasping his hands together as he looked about him. "I was bred in this place. I was a boy here." The spirit gazed upon him mildly. Its gentle touch, though it had been light and instantaneous, appeared still present to the old man's sense of feeling. He was conscious of the thousand odors floating in the air, each one connected with the thousand thoughts and hopes and joys and cares long, long forgotten. "Your lip is trembling," said the ghost. "And what is that upon your cheek?" Scrooge muttered, with an unusual catching in his voice, that it was a pimple, and begged the ghost to lead him where he would. "You recollect the way?" inquired the spirit. "Remember it?" cried Scrooge with fever. "I could walk it blindfolded." "Strange to have forgotten it for so many years," observed the ghost. "Let us be on." They walked along the road, Scrooge recognizing every gate and post and tree, until a little market town appeared in the distance, with its bridge, its church, and winding river. Some shaggy ponies now were seen trotting toward them, with boys upon their backs, who called to other boys in country gigs and carts, driven by farmers. All these boys were in great spirits, and shouted to each other, until the broad fields were so full of merry music that the crisp air laughed to hear it. "These are but shadows of things that have been," said the ghost. "They have no consciousness of us." The jocund travelers came on, and as they came, Scrooge knew and named every one. Why was he rejoiced beyond all bounds to see them? Why did his cold eye glisten, and his heart leap up as they went past? Why was he filled with gladness when he heard them give such others Merry Christmas? Give each other Merry Christmases as they parted at crossroads and byways for their several homes. What was Merry Christmas to Scrooge? Out upon Merry Christmas? What good had ever done to him? "School is not quite deserted," said the ghost. "A solitary child, neglected his friends, is left there still." Scrooge said he knew it, and he sobbed. They left the high road by the well-remembered lane, and soon approached the mansion of dull red brick, with a little weathercock surmounted cupola on the roof, and a bell hanging on it. It was a large house, but one of the broken fortunes, for the spacious offices were little used, their walls were damp and mossy. their windows broken, and their gates decayed. Fowls clucked and strutted in the stables, and the coach houses and sheds were overrun with grass. Nor was it more retentive of his ancient state within, for entering the dreary hall, and glancing through the open doors of many rooms, they found them poorly furnished, cold and vast. There was an earthly savour in the air, a chilly barrenness in the place, which associated itself somehow with too much getting up by candlelight and not too much to eat. They went, the ghost and Scrooge, across the hall to the door in the back of the house. It opened before them and disclosed a long, bare, melancholy room, made barer still by lines of plain deal forms and desks. At one of these a lonely boy was reading near a feeble fire, and Scrooge sat down upon a form and wept to see his poor forgotten self as he had used to be. Not a latent echo in the house, not a squeak and scuffle from the mice behind the panelings, not a drip from the half-thawed waterspout in the dull yard beyond, not a sigh among the leafless boughs of one despondent poplar, not the idle swinging of an empty storehouse door, no, not a clicking in the fire, but fell upon the heart of Scrooge with softening influence and gave a freer passage to his tears. The spirit touched him on the arm and pointed to his young self, intent upon his reading. Suddenly a man, in foreign garments, wonderfully real and distinct to look at, stood outside the window with an axe stuck in his belt, and leading an ass laden with wood by a bridle. "Why, it's Ali Baba!" Scrooge exclaimed in ecstasy. "It's dear old honest Ali Baba! Yes, I know. One Christmas time, when yonder solitary child was left here all alone, he did come, for the first time, just like that, poor boy, and Valentine," said Scrooge. "And his wild brother, Orson, there they go. And what's his name? Who was put down in his drawers asleep at the gate of Damascus? Don't you see him? And the Sultan's groom turned upside down on the guinea. There he was upon his head. Serve him right. I'm glad of it. What business he had to be married to the princess?" To hear Scrooge expending all the earnestness of his nature on such subjects in most extraordinary voice, between laughing and crying, and to see his heightened and excited face, would have been a surprise to his business friends in the city indeed. "There's the parrot!" cried Scrooge. "Green body and yellow tail, with a thing like a lettuce growing out of the top of his head. There he is! Poor Robin Crusoe, he called him. When he came home again after sailing around the island, poor Robin Crusoe, where have you been? Robin Crusoe!" The man thought he was dreaming, but he wasn't. It was a parrot, you know it. There goes Friday, running for his life to the little creek. Hola, hoop, hooloo! Then, with a rapidity of transition very foreign to his usual character, he said, in the pity of his former self, "Poor boy," and cried again. "I wish," Scrooge muttered, putting his hand in his pockets and looking about him, after drying his eyes with his cuff. "But it's too late now." "What is the matter?" asked the spirit. "Nothing," said Scrooge. "Nothing. There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should like to have given him something, that's all." The ghost smiled thoughtfully and waved his hand, saying as he did so, "So let us see another Christmas." Scrooge's former self grew larger at those words, and the room became a little darker and more dirty. The panels shrunk, the windows creaked, fragments of plaster fell out of the ceiling, and the naked laths were shown instead. But how all this was brought about, Scrooge knew no more than you do. He only knew that it's quite correct that everything had happened so. That there he was, alone again, when all other boys had gone home for the jolly holidays. He was not reading now, but walking up and down despairingly. Scrooge looked at the ghost, and with a mournful shaking of his hands, glanced anxiously towards the door. It opened, and a little girl, much younger than the boy, came darting in, and putting her arms around his neck, and kissing him, often kissing him, addressed him as her dear, dear brother. "I have come to bring you home, dear brother," said the child, clapping her tiny hands and bending down to laugh. "To bring you home, home, home! Home, little friend. returned the boy. Yes, said the child, brimful with glee. Home for good and all, home for ever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be. That home's like heaven. He spoke so greatly to me one dear night when I was going to bed, that I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home, and he said yes, you should, and sent me a coach to bring you. And you are to be a man, said the child, opening her eyes, and are never to come back here, but first we're to be all together, all the Christmas long, and have the merriest time in all the world. You're quite the woman, little Fran, exclaimed the boy. She clasped her hands and laughed and tried to touch his head, but being too little, laughed again and stood on tiptoe to embrace him. Then she began to drag him in her childish eagerness towards the door, and he, nothing loath to go, accompanied her. A terrible voice in the hall cried, Bring down Master Scrooge's box there! And in the hall appeared the schoolmaster himself, who glared on Master Scrooge with a ferocious condescension. Thank you, Ghost Spencer. And threw him into the dreadful state mind of shaking hands with him. He then conveyed him and his sister to the weariest of old well of shivering best popular that ever was seen. Sorry, shivering best parlor that was ever seen, where the maps upon the wall and the celestial and terrestrial globes in the windows were waxy with cold. Here he produced a decanter of curiously light wine and a block of curiously heavy cake, and administered installments of those dainties to the young people, at the same time sending out a meager servant to offer a glass of something to the postboy, who answered that he had thanked the gentleman. But if it was the same tap as he had tasted before, he had rather not. Master Scrooge's trunk being by this time tied on to the top of the chaise, the children bade the schoolmaster good-bye, right willingly, and getting into it, drove gaily down the garden sweep, the quick wheels dashing the hoarse frost and snow from the dark leaves of the evergreens like spray. Always a delicate creature, whom a breath might be withered, said the ghost. But she had a large heart. So she had, cried Scrooge. You're right. I'll not gainly say it, spirit, God forbid. She died a woman, said the ghost, and had, as I, uh, think, children. One child, Scrooge returned. True, said the ghost. Your nephew? Scrooge seemed uneasy in his mind, and answered briefly, Yes. Although they had but a moment left the school behind them, they were now on the busy thoroughfares of the city, where shadowy passengers passed and repassed, where shadowy carts and coaches battled for the way, and all the strife and tumult of the real city were. Okay. It was made plain enough by the dressing of the shops that here, too, it was Christmas time again. But it was evening, and the streets were lighted up. The ghost stopped at a certain warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it. Know it, said Scrooge. I was apprenticed here. They went in, at the sight of an old gentleman in a Welsh wig sitting behind such a high desk that if he had been 2 inches taller he might have knocked his head against the ceiling. Scrooge cried in great excitement, Why, it's old Fezziwig! Bless his heart, it's Fezziwig alive again! Old Fezziwig laid down his pen and looked up at the clock, which pointed to the hour of 7. He rubbed his hands, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed all over himself from his shoes to the origin of benevolence, and called out in the comfortable, oily, rich, fat, jovial voice, Yo-ho, there's Ebenezer! Dick! Scrooge's former self, now grown a young man, came briskly in, accompanied by his fellow prentice. Dick Wilkins, to be sure, said Scrooge to the ghost. Bless me, yes, there he is. He is very much attached to me, was Dick. Poor Dick. Dear, dear. Yo-ho, my boys, said Fezziwig. No more work tonight, Christmas Eve. Dick, Christmas, Ebenezer. Let's have the shutters up, cried old Fezziwig with a sharp clasp of his hands, before a man can say Jack Robinson. Why, wouldn't you believe how those two fellows went at it? They charged into the street with the shutters. 1, 2, 3, had 'em up in their places. 4, 5, 6, barred them and pinned them. 7, 8, 9, and came back before they could have gotten to 12, panting like racehorses. Hilly-ho! Cried Fezziwig, skipping down from his high desk with a wonderful agility. Clear away, my lads! Let's have a lots of room here! Holy-ho! Dick, Chirrup, Ebenezer! Clear away. Clear away. There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away or couldn't have cleared away with old Fezziwig looking on. It was done in a minute. Every movable was packed off as if it were dismissed from public life for evermore. The floor was swept and watered, with lamps were trimmed. The lamps were trimmed. Fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was snug, and warm, and dry, and bright a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night. Take a pause here, just to acknowledge Jesse. Hi and good night. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your night. Hey Ryan Tran, how you doing, buddy? It's good to see you. Want to thank Ghost Spencer. Appreciate you, bro. Dropping in and dropping the $2 dono. Hey, what's up, Kev? It's good to see you. Howdy, 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 Ghost Spencer. 21 like, 24 likes now. Y'all are great. Really appreciate y'all. What's up? What's up, Avocado? And Edwin Vasquez. How are you doing, Edwin? It's good to see you. Appreciate you popping in and enjoying the reading. 25 likes now, Mrs. 5150. Appreciate that. Appreciate everybody being here to enjoy one of my favorite holiday stories. We're an hour and a half in, and we're going through the first ghost, the ghost of Christmas is past, if you're familiar with the story. In came a fiddler with a music book and went up to the lofty desk and made an orchestra of it, and tuned like 50 stomach aches. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, and a vast substantial smile. In came the three Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 young fellows whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid with her cousin, the baker. In came the cook with her brother's particular friend, the milkman. In came the boy from over the way, who was suspected of not having board enough from his master, trying to hide himself behind the girl from next door, but one who proved to have had her ears pulled by her mistress. In they all came, one after another, some shyly, some boldly, some gracefully, some awkwardly, some pushing, some pulling. In they all came, anyhow and everyhow. Anyway, they all went, 20 couple at once, hands half round and back again, and another way. Down the middle and up again, round and round, in various stages of affectionate grouping. Old top couples always turning up in the wrong places, new top couples starting off again. As soon as they got there, all top couples at last, and not a bottom one to help them. When the result was brought about, old Fezziwig, clasping his hands to stop the dance, cried out, "Well down!" And the fiddler plunged his hot face into a pot of porter, especially provided for that purpose. But scorning rest upon his reappearance, he instantly began again, though there were no dancers yet, as if the other fiddler had been carried home, exhausted on the shutter, and he were a brand new man, resolved and beat him out of sight or perish. There were more dances, and there were forfeits, and more dances, and there was cake, and there was negus, and there was a great piece of cold roast, and there was a great piece of cold boiled, and there was mince pies, and plenty of beer. But the great effect of the evening came after the roast and boiled, when the fiddler, an artful dog mind, the sort of man who knew his business better than you or I could have told him, struck up Sir Roger de Coverley. Then old Fezziwig stood out to dance with Mrs. Fezziwig, top couple too, with a good stiff piece of work cut out for them, 3 or 4 or 20 pair of partners, people who were not to be trifled with, people who would dance and had no notion of walking. But if they had been twice as many, 4 times, old Fezziwig would have been a match for them, and so would Mrs. Fezziwig. As to her, she was worthy to be his partner in every sense of the term. If that's not high praise, tell me higher, and I'll use it. A positive light appeared to issue from Fezziwig's calves. They shone in every part of the dance like moons. You couldn't have predicted at any given time what would have come of them next. And when old Fezziwig and Miss Fezziwig had all gone through all the dance, advance to retire, hold hands with your partner, bow thee, curtsy, and corkscrew, thread the needle and back again with your place, Fezziwig cut so deftly that he appeared to wink with his legs and came upon his feet again without a stagger. When the clock struck 11, this domestic ball broke up. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig took their stations, one on either side of the door, and shaking hands with every person individually as he or she went out, wished him or her a Merry Christmas. When everybody had retired but the two prentices, they did the same to them, and thus the cheerful voices died away, and the lads were left to their beds, which were under the counter in the back shop. During the whole of this time, Scrooge has acted like a man out of his wits. His heart and soul were in the scene with his former self. He corroborated everything, remembered everything, enjoyed everything, and underwent the strangest agitation. It was not until now, when the bright faces of his former self and Dick were turned from them, that he remembered the ghost, and became conscious that it was looking full upon him, while the light upon his head burned very clear. While the light upon his head burned very clear. "A small matter," said the ghost, "to make these silly folks so full of gratitude." "Small?" echoed Scrooge. The spirit signed to him to listen to the two prentices, who were pouring out their hearts in praise of Fezziwig, and when he had done so, said, "Why, is it not? He has spent but a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4 perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves his praise?" It isn't that," said Scrooge, heated by the remark and speaking unconsciously like his former, not his latter self. "It isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to render us happy or unhappy, to make our service light or burdensome, a pleasure or a toil. Say that his power lies in words than looks, and things so slight and insignificant that it is impossible to add and count them up. What then? The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune." He felt the spirits glanced and stopped. "What is the matter?" "Nothing particular," said Scrooge. "Something, I think," the ghost insisted. "No," said Scrooge. "No, I should like to be able to say a word or two to my clerk just now, that's all." His former self turned down the lamps as he gave utterance to the wish, and Scrooge and the ghost again stood side by side in the open air. "My time grows short," observed the spirit. "Quick!" This was not addressed to Scrooge or to anyone whom he could see, but it produced an immediate effect, for again Scrooge saw himself. He was now older, a man in the prime of his life. His face had not the harsh and rigid lines of later years, but it had begun to wear the signs of care and avarice. There was an eager, greedy, restless motion in the eye, which showed the passion that had taken root, and where the shadow of the growing tree would fall. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl in a mourning dress, in whose eyes there were tears, which sparkled in the light that shone out of the ghost of the Christmas past. "It matters little," she said softly. "To you, very little. Another idol has displaced me, and if you can cheer and comfort you in time to come, as I would have tried to do, I have no just cause to grieve." "What idol has displaced you?" he rejoined. "A golden one." "This is the even-handed dealing of the world," he said. "There is nothing on which is so hard as poverty. There is nothing to which professes to condemned with such severity as the pursuit of wealth." "You fear the world too much," she answered gently. "All your other hopes have merged into the hopes of being beyond the chance of its sordid reproach. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one until the master passion, gain, engrosses you, have I not?" "What then?" he retorted. "Even if I have grown so much wiser, what then? I am not changed toward you." She shook her head. "Am I?" Our contract our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor and constant to be so, and content to be so, until, in good season, we could improve our worldly fortune by our patient industry. You are changed. When it was made, you were another man. I was a boy, he said impatiently. Your own feeling tells you that you are not what you are. She returned, I am. That which promised happiness when we were one in heart is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often and how keenly I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it and can release you. Have I ever sought release? In words? No, never. In what then? In a changed nature, in an altered spirit, in another atmosphere of life, another hope as its great end, in everything that made my love any worth or value in your sight. If this had never been between us, said the girl, looking mildly but with steadiness upon him, tell me, would you have seeked me out and try to win me now? No. He seemed to yield to the justice of this supposition, in spite of himself, but he said with a struggle, you think not? I would gladly think otherwise if I could, she answered. Heaven knows, when I have learned the truth like this, I know how strong and irresistible it must be. But if you were free today, tomorrow, yesterday, can even I believe that you would choose a dowerless girl who you, in your very confidence with her, weigh everything by gain? Or, choosing her, if for a moment you were false enough to do your one guiding principle to do so? Do I not know that your repentance and regret would surely follow? I do, and I release you with a full heart for the love of him you once were. He was about to speak, but with her head turned from him, she resumed. You may, the memory of what is past half makes me hope you will, have pain in this, a very, very brief time, and you will dismiss the recollection of it gladly, as an unprofitable dream from which it happened well that you awoke. May you be happy in life that you have chosen. She left him, and they parted. Spirit, said Scrooge, show me no more. Conduct me home. Why do you delight to torture me? One shadow more, exclaimed the ghost. No more, cried Scrooge. No more. I do not wish to see it. Show me no more. But the relentless ghost pinioned him in both arms and forced him to observe what happened next. They were in another scene and place, a room, not very large or handsome, but full of comfort. Near to the winter fire sat a beautiful young girl, so like the last that Scrooge believed it was the same until he saw her. Now a comely matron sitting up opposite her daughter. The noise in this room was perfectly tumultuous, for there was more children there than Scrooge in his agitated state of mind could count, and unlike the celebrated herd in the poem, they were not 40 children conducting themselves like one, but every child was conducting itself like 40. The consequences were uproarious beyond belief, but no one seemed to care. On the contrary, the mother and daughter laughed heartily, and enjoyed it very much, and the latter, soon beginning to mingle in the sports, got pillaged by the young brigands most ruthlessly. What would I not have given to be one of them? Though I never could have been so rude. No, no, I wouldn't for the wealth of all the world have crushed that braided hair and torn it down, and for the precious little shoe, I wouldn't have plucked it off. God bless my soul, to save my life, as a measuring her waist in sport, as they did, bold young brood. I couldn't have done it. I should have expected my arm to have grown round for the punishment, and never came straight again. And yet I should have dearly liked, I own, to have touched her lips, to have questioned her, that she might have opened them, to have looked upon the lashes of her downcast eyes and never raised a blush, to have let loose waves of hair, an inch, of which would be a keepsake beyond price. In short, I should have liked, I do confess, to have had the lightest license of a child, and yet been a man enough to know its value. But now a knocking at the door was heard, and such a rush immediately ensued, that she, with laughing face and plundered dress, was borne towards it the center of a flushed and boisterous group, just in time to greet the father who came home, attended by a man laden with Christmas toys and presents. Then the shouting and the struggling and the onslaught that was made on the defenseless porter, the scaling him with chairs for ladders to dive into his pockets, despoil him of brown paper parcels, hold on tight to his cravat, hung him around the neck, pommel his back, and kick his legs, an irrepressible affection. The shouts of wonder and delight with which the development of every package was received. The terrible announcement that the baby had been taken in the act of putting the doll's frying pan into his mouth, and was more than suspected of having swallowed a fictitious turkey glued on a wooden platter. The immense relief of finding this a false alarm, the joy, the gratitude, and ecstasy. They were all indescribable alike. It is enough that by degrees the children and their emotions got out of the parlor, and by one stair at a time, up to the top of the house, where they went to bed, and so subsided. And now Scrooge looked on more attentively than ever when the master of the house, having his daughter leaning fondly on him, sat down with her and her mother at his own fireside, and when he thought that such another creature, quite as graceful and as full of promise, might have called him father, and been a springtime in the haggard winter of his life, his sight grew very dim indeed. "Belle," said the husband, turning to his wife with a smile, "I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon." "Who was it?" "Guess." "How can I? I don't know," she added in the same breath, laughing as she laughed. "Mr. Scrooge?" "Mr. Scrooge it was. I passed his office window, and as it was not shut up, and he had a candle inside, I could scarcely help seeing him. His partner lies upon the point of death, I hear, and there he sat alone, quite alone in the world, I do believe." "Spirit," said Scrooge in a broken voice, "remove me from this place." "I told you these were shadows of the things that have been," said the ghost. "That there is what they are, and do not blame me." "Remove me," Scrooge exclaimed. "I cannot bear it." He turned upon the ghost, and seeing that it looked upon him with a face in which, in some strange way, there were fragments of all faces it had shown him, wrestled within. "Leave me, take me back, haunt me no longer." In the struggle, if that can be called a struggle, in which the ghost, with no visible resistance on his own part, was undisturbed by any effort of its adversary, Scrooge observed that its light was burning high and bright, and dimly connecting that with its influence over him. He seized the extinguisher's cap, and by the sudden action pressed it down upon his head. The spirit dropped beneath it, so that the extinguisher covered its whole form. But though Scrooge pressed it down with all his force, he could not hide the light, which streamed from under it in an unbroken flood upon the ground. He was conscious of being exhausted, and overcome by irresistible drowsiness, and further of being of his own bedroom. He gave the cap a parting squeeze, in which his hands relaxed, and he had barely time to reel to bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. The end of chapter 2. Oh, well, I hope you have a good night, Boo. I appreciate you being here. Laura Lovejoy. No worries at all. It's good to see you. Hope you and Dex are doing well. Alec Longoria, it's good to see you. Long day and I'm tired. No worries at all. Good reading. Thank you. I appreciate that, Edwin. I just saw that now. Yes, I certainly do give it my best with this old-timey language. Sometimes it can be a little tough, or I stop. It breaks the facade for me, and I apologize, y'all. But yeah, I'm really enjoying the story. I hope my voices are a good differentiation between characters. About an hour and 50. And we're going to get into the second of the three spirits. I got to go to bed, Kev. I wish I could hang out longer. I love you. I love you too, Mama Ghost. I hope you have a good rest of your night. Doing fantastic. I appreciate you, brother. Thank you. And yes, you have a good rest of your night, Mama. I appreciate you popping in. 26 likes. Let's go. Got 15 of y'all in here. Yes, good night, Mama Ghost. We love you. Stave 3, the second of the three spirits. Awakening in the middle of the prodigiously tough snore and sitting up in bed to get his thoughts together, Scrooge had no occasion to be told that the bell was again upon the stroke of 1. He felt that he was restored to consciousness in the right nick of time for the especial purpose of holding a conference with the second messenger dispatched him through Jacob Marley's intervention. But finding that he turned uncomfortably cold when he began to wonder which of his curtains the new spectre would draw back, he put them every one aside with his own hands, and lying down again, established a sharp lookout all around the bed, for he wished to challenge the spirit on the moment of its appearance, and did not wish to be taken by surprise and made nervous. Gentlemen of the free and easy sort, who plumb themselves on being acquainted with a move or two, and being usually equal to the time of day, express the wide range of their capacity for the adventure by observing that they are good for anything from pitch and toss to manslaughter, between which opposite extremes, no doubt, there lies the tolerably wide and comprehensive range of subjects. Without venturing for Scrooge quite as hardly as this, I don't mind calling on you to believe that he was ready for a good broad field of strange appearances, and that nothing between a baby and a rhinoceros would have astonished him very much. Now, being prepared for almost anything, he was not by any means prepared for nothing, and consequently, when the bell struck 1 and no shape appeared, he was taken with a violent fit of trembling. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, quarter of an hour went by, yet nothing came. All this time he lay upon his bed, and the very core and center of a blaze of ruddy light which streamed upon it, which, when the clock proclaimed the hour, and which, being only light, was more alarming than a dozen ghosts, as he was powerless to make out what it meant, or would be at, and was sometimes apprehensive that he might be, at that very moment, an interesting case of spontaneous combustion, without having the consolation of knowing it. At last, however, he began to think, as you or I would have thought at first, for it was always the person not in the predicament who knows what ought to have been done at it. It would have unquestionably have done it too. At last, I say, he began to think that the source and secret of this ghostly light might be in the adjoining room, from whence, on further tracing it, it seemed to shine. This light taking full possession of his mind, he got up softly and shuffled in his slippers to the door. The moment Scrooge's hand was on the lock, a strange voice called him by his name and bade him to enter. He obeyed. It was his own room. There was no doubt about that, but it had undergone a surprising transformation. The walls and ceiling were hung with living green that looked so perfect grove, from every part of which bright gleaming berries glistened. The crisp leaves of holly, mistletoe, and ivy reflected back the light, and if so many little mirrors had been scattered there, and such a mighty blaze went roaring up the chimney as that dull petrification of the hearth had never known in Scrooge's time, or Marley's, or for many and many a winter season gone, heaped up upon the floor to form a kind of throne where turkeys, geese, game, poultry, brawn, great joints of meat, suckling pigs, long wreaths of sausages, mincemeat pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, hot red chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy oranges, lustrous pears, immense 12th cakes, and seething bowls of punch that made the chamber dim with their delicious stream. In easy state upon this couch there sat a jolly giant, glorious to see, who bore a glowing torch, in shape not unlike Plentry's horn, and held it up high up to shed its light on Scrooge as he came peeping round the corner. "Come in!" exclaimed the ghost. "Come in, and know me better, man." Scrooge entered timidly and hung his head before the spirit. He was not the dogged Scrooge he had been, and though his eyes were clear and kind, he did not like to meet them. "I am the ghost of Christmas present," said the spirit. "Look upon me." Scrooge reverently did so. It was clothed in one simple deep green robe or mantle, bordered with white fur. This garment hung so loosely on the figure that its capacious breast was bare, as if disdaining to be warded or concealed by any artifice. Its feet, observable beneath the ample folds of the garment, were also bare, and on its head wore no other covering than a holly wreath which sat here and there with shining icicles. His dark brown curls were long and free as its genial face, its sparkling eyes, its open hand and cheery voice, its unconstrained demeanor, and its joyful air. Girded round its middle was an antique scabbard, but no sword was in it, and an ancient sheath was eaten up with rust. "You have never seen the like of me before," exclaimed the spirit. "Never," Scrooge made an answer to it. Have never walked forth with the younger members of my family, meaning, for I am very young, my elder brothers born in these later years?" pursued the phantom. "I don't think I have," said Scrooge. "I am afraid I have not, but you had many brothers, spirit?" "More than 1,800," said the ghost. "A tremendous family to provide for," muttered Scrooge. The ghost of Christmas present rose. Spirit," said Scrooge submissively, "conduct me where you will. I went forth last night on compulsion, and I learnt a lesson which is working now, tonight. If you ought to teach me, let me profit by it. Touch my robe." Scrooge did as he was told, and held it fast. Holly, mistletoe, red berries, ivy, turkeys, geese, game, poultry, brawn, meat, pig, sausage, oysters, pies, pudding, fruit, and punch all vanished instantly. So did the room, the fire, the ruddy glow, the hour of the night, and they stood in the city streets on Christmas morning, where, for the weather was severe, the people made a rough but brisk and not unpleasant kind of music, in scraping the snow from the pavements in front of their dwellings and from the tops of their houses, whence it was mad delight to the boys to see it come plumping down into the road below and splitting into artificial little snowstorms. The house fronts looked black enough, and the windows blacker, contrasting with the smooth white sheet of snow upon the roofs, and with the dirtier snow upon the ground, with which deposit had been plowed deep up in deep furrows by the heavy wheels of carts and wagons, furrows that crossed and recrossed each other hundreds of times where the great streets branched off, and made intricate channels, hard to trace, in the thick yellow mud and icy water. The sky was gloomy, and the shortest streets were choked up with the dingy mist, half thawed, half frozen, whose heavier particles descended in the shower of sooty atoms, as if all the chimneys in Great Britain had, by one consent, caught fire, and were blazing away in their dear hearts' content. There was nothing more cheerful in the climate or the town, and yet there was an air of cheerfulness abroad that the clearest summer air and brightest summer sun might have endeavored to diffuse in vain. For the people who were shoveling away on the housetops were jovial and full of glee, calling out to one another from the parapets, and now that the exchange of factitious snowball, better-natured missile far than many a wordy jest, laughing heartily as if it went right, and not less heartily as if it went wrong. The poulterers' shops were still half open, and the fruiterers were radiant in their glory. There was a great round pot-bellied baskets of chestnut, shaped like old waistcoats of jolly old gentlemen, lolling at the doors and tumbling out onto the streets in their apoplectic opulence. There were ruddy brown-faced, broad-girthed Spanish onions, shining in the fatness of their growth like Spanish friars, and winking from their shelves in the wanton slyness of the girls as they went by, and glanced demurely at the hang-up mistletoe. There were pears and apples clustered high in the blooming pyramids. There were bunches of grapes made in the shopkeeper's benevolence to dangle from capacious hooks, uh, that people's mouths might water gratis if they passed. There were piles of filberts, mossy and brown, recalling in their fragrance ancient walks among the woods and pleasant shufflings ankle deep through withered leaves. There were Norfolk biffins, squab and swarthy, setting off the yellow of the oranges and lemons, and in the great compactness of their juicy persons, urgently entreating to beseeching to be carried home in paper bags and eaten after dinner. The very gold and silver fish set forth among the choice fruits in the bowl, though members of a dull and stagnant blooded race, appeared to know that there was something going on, and to a fish went grasping round and round their little world in slow and passionless excitement. The grocers, nearly closed, with perhaps two shutters down, or one, but throughout those gaps with such glimpses. It was not alone that the scales descending on the counter made a merrier sound, or that the twine of the roller parted company so briskly, or that the canisters were rattled up and down like juggling tricks, or even that the blended scents of tea and coffee were so grateful to the nose, or even that the raisins were so plentiful and rare, the almonds so extremely white, the sticks of cinnamon so long and straight, the other spices so delicious, the candied fruits so caked and spotted with molten sugars as to make the coldest lookers on feel faint, and subsequently bilious. Nor was it that the figs were moist and pulpy, or that the French plums blushed in modest tartness from their highly decorated boxes, or that everything was good to eat and in its Christmas dress. But the customers were all so hurried and so eager in the hopeful promise of the day that they tumbled up against each other at the door, clashing their wicker baskets wildly, and left their purchases upon the counter, and came running back to fetch them, and committed hundreds of the like mistakes in the best humor possible, while the grocer and his people were so frank and fresh that the polished hearts with which they fastened their apron behind might have been their own, worn outside for a general inspection and for Christmas's daws to peck at if they chose. But soon the steeples called good people all to church and chapel, and away they came, flocking through the streets in their best clothes and with their gayest faces. And at the same time there emerged from the scores of by-streets, lanes, and nameless turnings innumerable people, carrying their dinners to the bakers' shops. The sights of these poor revelers appeared to interest the spirit very much, for he stood with Scrooge beside him in the baker's doorway, and taking off the covers as the bearers passed, sprinkled incense on their dinners from his touch. And it was very uncommon from his torch, kind of torch, for once or twice when there were angry words between some dinner carriers who had jostled with each other, he shed a few drops of water on it from them, and their good humor was restored directly, for they said it was a shame to quarrel upon Christmas Day, and so it was, God love it, so it was. In time the bells ceased, and the bakers were shut up, and yet there was a genial shadowing forth of all these dinners and the progress of their cooking. In the thawed blotch of the wet above each baker's oven, there was pavement smoked as if the stones were cooking too. "Is there a particular flavor in what you sprinkled from your torch?" asked Scrooge. "There is, my own." "Would it apply to any kind of dinner on this day?" asked Scrooge. "To any kindly given to a poor one most." "Why to a poor one most?" asked Scrooge. "Because it needs it most." "Spirit," said Scrooge, after a moment's thought, "I wonder you, of all the beings in the many worlds about us, should desire to cramp these people's opportunities of innocent enjoyment." "I?" cried the spirit. "You would deprive them of their means of dining every seventh day, often that only day on which they could be said to dine at all," said Scrooge, "wouldn't you?" "I?" cried the spirit. "You seek to close these places on the seventh day," said Scrooge, "and it comes to the same thing." "I seek!" exclaimed the spirit. Forgive me if I'm wrong. It has been done in your name, or at least in that of your family, said Scrooge. Ah, there are some upon this earth of yours, returned the spirit, who lay claim to know us, and who do their deeds of passion, pride, ill will, hatred, envy, bigotry, and selfishness in our name, who are as strange to us and all our kith and kin as if they had never lived. Remember that, and charge their doings on themselves, not us. Scrooge promised that he would, and they went on, invisibly, as they had been before, into the suburbs of the town. It was a remarkable quality of the ghost, which Scrooge had observed at the baker's, that notwithstanding his gigantic size he could accommodate himself to any place with ease, and that he stood beneath the low roof quite as gracefully and like a supernatural creature as it was possible he could have done in any lofty hall. And perhaps it was the pleasure of the good spirit had in showing off his power of his, or else it was his own kind, generous, hardy nature, and his sympathy with all poor men that led him straight to Scrooge's clerks. For there he went, and he took Scrooge with him, holding to his robe, and on the threshold of the door the spirit smiled, and stopped to bless Bob Cratchit's dwelling with the sprinklings of his torch. Think of that! Bob had but 15 bob a week himself. He pocketed on Saturdays but 15 copies of his Christian name, and yet the ghost of Christmas Pleasant blessed his four-roomed house. Then up rose Mrs. Cratchit, Cratchit's wife, dressed out but poorly in a twice-turned gown, but brave in ribbons, which are cheap and made a goodly show for sixpence. And she laid the cloth, assisted by Belinda Cratchit, second of her daughters, also brave in ribbons, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into the saucepan of potatoes, and getting the corners of the monstrous shirt collar, Bob's private property conferred upon his son and heir of the honor of the day, into his mouth, rejoiced to find himself so gallantly attired. He yearned to show his linen in a fashionable parks, and now two smaller Cratchits, boy and girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they had smelt the goose, and known it for their own. And basking in luxurious thoughts of sage and onion, these young Cratchits danced about the table, and exalted Master Peter Cratchit to the skies, while he, not proud, although his collars nearly choked him, blew the fire until the slow potatoes bubbling up knocked proudly at the saucepan lid to be let out and peeled. "What has ever got your precious father, then?" said Mrs. Cratchit. "And your brother, Tiny Tim, and Martha? Weren't as late last Christmas Day by half an hour." "Here's Martha, mother," said the girl, appearing as she spoke. "Here's Martha, mother," cried two young Cratchits. "Hurrah! There's such a goose, Martha." "Why, bless your heart alive, my dear, how late you are," said Mrs. Cratchit, kissing her a dozen times and taking off her shawl and bonnet for her, with officious zeal. Uh, "We'd a deal of work to finish up last night," replied the girl, "and had to clear away this morning, mother." "Well, never mind, so long as you're come," said Mrs. Cratchit. "Sit ye down before the fire, my dear, and have a warm, Lord bless you." "No, no, there's father coming," cried the two young Cratchits, who were everywhere at once. "Hide, Martha, hide!" So Martha hid herself, and in came little Bob, the father, with at least 3 feet of comforter, exclusive of the fridge, hanging down before him, and his threadbare cloth darned up and brushed, to look seasonable, and Tiny Tim upon his shoulders. Alas for Tiny Tim! He bore a little crutch, and had his limbs supported by an iron frame. "Why, where's our Martha?" cried Bob Cratchit, looking around. "Not coming," said Mrs. Cratchit. "Not coming!" said Bob, with a sudden declination in his high spirits, for he had been Tim's blood horse all the way from church, and had come home rampant. "Not coming upon Christmas Day!" Martha did not like to see him disappointed, if it were only in joke, so she came out prematurely from behind the closet door and ran into his arms, while the two young Cratchit hustled Tiny Tim and bore him off into the wash-house, that he might hear the pudding singing in the copper. And how did little Tim behave? Asked Mrs. Cratchit when she had rallied Bob and his credulity, and Bob had hugged his daughter to his heart's content. As good as gold, said Bob, and better somehow. He gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much and thinks the strangest things you've ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped that people saw him in the church because he was a cripple and it might be pleasant to them to remember upon Christmas Day who made lame beggars walk and blind men see. Bob's voice was tumultuous, and he was told when he told them this, and trembled more when he said that Tiny Tim was growing strong and hearty. His active little church was heard upon the floor. His active little crutch was heard upon the floor, and back came Tiny Tim before another word was spoken, escorted by his brother and sister to his stool beside the fire. And while Bob, turning up his cuffs, as if, poor fellow, they were capable of being made more shabby, compounded some hot mixture in a jug with gin and lemons, and stirred it round and put it on the hob to simmer. Master Peter, who the two ubiquitous young Cratchits went to fetch the goose, with which they soon returned in high procession. Such a bustle ensued that you might have thought a goose the rarest of all birds, a feathered phenomenon to which a black swan was a matter of course. And in truth, it was something very like it in that house. Mrs. Cratchit made the gravy, ready beforehand in a little saucepan, hissing hot. Master Peter mashed the potatoes with incredible vigor. Miss Belinda sweetened up the apple sauce. Martha dusted the hot plates. Bob took Tiny Tim beside him in a tiny corner at the table. The two young Cratchits set chairs for everybody, not forgetting themselves, and mounting guard upon their post, crammed spoons into their mouth, lest they should shriek for goose before their turn came to be helped. At last the dishes were set on, and grace was said. It was succeeded by a breathless pause as Mrs. Cratchit, looking slowly all around the carving knife, prepared to plunge it into the breast. But when she did, and when the long-expected gush of stuffing issued forth, one murmur of delight arose all around the board, and even Tiny Tim, excited by the two young Cratchit, beat on the table with the handle of his knife, and feebly cried, "Hurrah!" There never was such a goose. Bob said he didn't believe there ever was such a goose cooked. Its tenderness and flavor, size and cheapness, were the themes of the universal admiration. Eked out by the applesauce and mashed potatoes, it was a sufficient dinner for the whole family. Indeed, as Mrs. Cratchit said with a great delight, surveying one small atom of a bone upon the dish, they hadn't ate at all at last. They hadn't ate it all at last. Yet everyone had had enough, and the youngest Cratchit in particular were steeped in sage and onion to the eyebrows. But now, the plates being changed by Miss Belinda, Mrs. Cratchit left the room alone, too nervous to bear witness, to take the pudding up and bring it in. Suppose it should not be done enough. Suppose it should break in turning out. Suppose somebody should have gone over the well of the backyard and stolen it while they were merry with the goose. A supposition at which the two young Cratchits became livid. All sorts of horrors were supposed. Hello! A great deal of steam. A pudding was out of the copper, a smell like a washing day. It was the cloth, a smell like an eating house, and a pastry cook's next door to each other, with the laundress next door to that. That was the pudding. In half a minute Mrs. Cratchit entered, flushed but smiling proudly with the pudding, like a speckled cannonball, so hard and firm, blazing in half a quartern of ignited brandy, and bedite with Christmas holly stuck to the top. "Oh, a wonderful pudding," Bob Cratchit said, and calmly, too, that he regarded it as the greatest success achieved by Mrs. Cratchit since their marriage. Mrs. Cratchit said that now the weight was off her mind, she would confess that she had her doubts about the quantity of flour. Everybody had something to say about it, but nobody said or thought uh, it was at all a small pudding for a large family. It would have been flat hearsay to do so. Any Cratchit would have blushed to hint at such a thing. At last the dinner was all done, the cloth was cleared, the hearth swept, and the fire made up. The compound in the jug being tasted and considered perfect, apples and oranges were put upon the table, and a shovelful of chestnuts on the fire. Then all the Cratchit family drew around the hearth in what Bob Cratchit called a circle, meaning half a one, and at Bob Cratchit's elbow stood a family display of glass, 2 tumblers, and a custard cup without a handle. These held the hot stuff from the jug, however, as well as golden goblets would have done, and Bob served out all with beaming looks, while the chestnuts on the fire sputtered and cracked noisily. Then Bob proposed, "A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us." Which all the family re-echoed. "God bless us, every one," said Tiny Tim, the last of all. He sat very close to his father's side, upon his little stool. Bob held his withered little hand in his, as if he loved the child and wished to keep him by his side, and dreaded that he might be taken from him. "Spirit," said Scrooge, with the interest he had never felt before, "tell me if Tiny Tim will live?" "I see a vacant seat," replied the ghost, "in a poor chimney corner at the church without an owner, carefully preserved. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die." "No, no," said Scrooge. "Oh, no, kind spirit, say it will be spared." "If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my race," returned the ghost, "will find him here. What then? If he be like to die, he had better do it and decrease the surplus population." Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the spirit, and was overcome with penitence and grief. "Man," said the ghost, "if man you be in heart, not adamant, forbear that wicked cannot until you have discovered what the surplus is, and what it is, and where it is. Will you decide what men shall live, what men shall die? It may be that in the sight of heaven you are more worthless and less fit to live than millions like this poor man's child. O God, to hear the insect of the leaf pronouncing on the too much life among his hungry brothers in the dust." Scrooge bent before the ghost's rebuke, and trembling cast his eyes upon the ground, but he raised them speedily on hearing his own name. "Mr. Scrooge," said Bob, "I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast." "The founder of the feast, indeed!" cried Mrs. Cratchit, reddening. "I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon, and I'd hope he'd have a good appetite for it." "My dear," said Bob, "the children, Christmas Day." "It should be Christmas Day, I am sure," she said, "on which one drinks the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow." "My dear," was Bob's mild answer, "Christmas Day." "I'll drink his health for your sake, and the day's," said Mrs. Cratchit. "Not for his. Long life to him, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I've no doubt." The children drank the toast after her. It was the first of their proceedings which had no heartiness in it. Tiny Tim drank it last of all, but he didn't care 2 pence for it. Scrooge was the ogre of the family. The mention of his name cast a dark shadow on the party, which was not dispelled for a full 5 minutes. After it had passed away, they were 10 times merrier than before. From the mere relief of Scrooge, the baleful being done with, Bob Cratchit told them how he had a situation in his eye for Master Peter, which would bring in, if obtained, full 5 and 6 pence weekly. The 2 young Cratchits laughed tremendously at the idea of Peter being a man of business, and Peter himself looked thoughtfully at the fire from between his collars, as if he were deliberating what particular investments he should favor when he came into the receipt of the bewildering income. Martha, who was a poor apprentice at the milliner's, then told them what kind of work she had to do, and how many hours she worked at a stretch, and how she meant to lie in a bed tomorrow morning for a good long rest, tomorrow being a holiday she passed at home. Also, how she had seen a countess and a lord some days before, and how the lord was much about as tall as Peter, at which Peter pulled up his collar so high that you couldn't have seen his head, if you had been there. All this time the chestnuts and the jug went round and round, and by the by they had a song about a lost child traveling in the snow from Tiny Tim, who had a plaintive little voice and sang it very well indeed. There was nothing of high mark in this. They were not a handsome family, they were not well dressed, their shoes were far from being waterproof, their clothes were scanty, and Peter might have known, and very likely did, the inside of the pawnbroker's. But they were happy, grateful, pleased with one another, and contented with the time, and when they faded and looked happier yet in the bright. I'm going to pause. Sean Bowden, how are you doing? Kara, Chaos Pudding. Same, haven't seen you. Kara, I hope you're doing well, Kara. It's good to see you. Uh, Kel will be getting a package next week, and it will have a card in it for you. Excellent. Super nice, Brangus. I'm just scrolling back up, making sure I didn't miss anything. I'm gonna go saying night to everybody. Doing all right. How about you? I'm doing okay. I was really looking forward to tonight. I know we're at about 2 hours 20 minutes. I wanted to get through the whole story. We're about halfway through, just coming to the end of the second apparition, and we still have one more, but that one is a few words, so it might be quick. Ernie, it's good to see you, my friend. 15 of y'all in here, 29 likes on a Monday. Let's go. Really appreciate y'all. Let's get through this third chapter, rather. Second apparition. Great stream. I appreciate that, Laura. Sprinklings of the Spirit's torch that at parting, Scrooge had his eye upon them, and especially upon Tiny Tim until the last. By this time it was getting dark, and snowing pretty heavy. And as Scrooge and the Spirit went along the streets, the brightness of the roaring fires in kitchens, parlors, and all sorts of rooms was wonderful. Here, the flickering of the blaze showed preparations for a cozy dinner, with hot plates baking through and through before the fire, and deep red curtains ready to be drawn to shut out cold and darkness. There, all the children of the house were running out to the snow to meet their married sisters, brothers, cousins, uncles, aunts, and to be the first to greet them. Here, again, were shadows on the window blind of guests assembling, and there were a group of handsome girls, all hooded in fur, booted, and all chattering at once, tripped lightly off to some near neighbor's house, where woe upon the single man who saw them enter. Artful witches, well, they knew it in a glow. But if you had judged from the numbers of people on their way to friendly gatherings, you might have thought that no one was at home to give them welcome when they got there. Instead of every house expecting company and piling up its fires half chimney high, blessing on it, how the ghost exalted, how it bared its breadth of breast, and opened its capacious palm, and floated on, outpouring, with the generous hand, its bright and harmless mirth on everything within its reach. The very lamplighter who ran on before doting the dusky street with specks of light, and who was dressed to spend the evening elsewhere, laughed out loudly as the Spirit passed, though little keened the lamplighter that he had any company but Christmas. And now, without a word of warning from the ghost, they stood upon the bleak and desert moor, where a monstrous mass of rude stone were cast about as though it were a burial place of giants, and water spread itself wheresoever it listed, or would have done so but for the frost that held it prisoner. And nothing grew but moss and furze. and coarse, rank grass. Down in the west and setting sun had left a streak of fiery red, which glared upon the desolate for an instant, like a sullen eye, and frowning lower, lower, lower yet, was lost in the thick gloom of darkest night. "What place is this?" asked Scrooge. "A place where miners live, who labored in the bowels of the earth," returned the spirit. "But they know me, see?" A light shone from the window of the hut, and swiftly they advanced towards it. Passing through the wall of mud and stone, they found a cheerful company assembled around a glowing fire. An old man and woman, with their children and their children's children, and another generation beyond that, all decked out gaily in their holiday attire. The old man, in a voice that seldom rose above the howling of the wind upon the barren waste, was singing them a Christmas song. It had been a very old song from when he was a boy, and from time to time they all joined in the chorus, so surely, as they raised their voices, the old man got quite blithe and loud, and so surely as they stopped, his vigor sank again. The spirit did not tarry here, but bade Scrooge hold his robe, and passing on above the moor, sped whither? Not to see, to see. To Scrooge's horror, looking back, he saw the last of the land, a frightful range of rocks beyond them, and his ears were deafened by the thundering of water as it rolled and roared and raged among the dreadful caverns as it had worn and fiercely tried to undermine the earth. Built upon the dismal reef of sunken rocks, some league or so from shore, on which the waters chafed and dashed the wild year through, there stood a solitary lighthouse. Great heaps of seaweed clung to its base, and storm birds, born of the wind, might one suppose, as seaweed of the water, rose and fell about it, like the waves they skimmed. But even here, two men who watched the light had made a fire, that through the loophole in the thick stone wall shed out of the ray of brightness on the awful sea, joining their horny hands over the rough table at which they sat, they wished each other Merry Christmas in their can of grog, and one of them, the elder, too, with his face all damaged and scarred with hard weather, as the figurehead of the old ship might be, struck up a sturdy song that was like a gale in itself. Again the ghost sped on above the black and heaving sea, on, until, being far away, as he told Scrooge, from any shore, they lighted on a ship. They stood beside the helmsman at the wheel and looked out on the bow. The officer who had the watch, dark, ghostly figures in their several stations, but every man among them hummed a Christmas tune, or had a Christmas thought, or spoke below his breath to his companion of some bygone Christmas day, with homeward hopes belonging to it, and every man on board, waking or sleeping, good or bad, had had a kinder word for another on that day than on that day in the year, and had shared to some extent in its festivities, and had remembered those he cared for at a distance, and had known that he had delighted to remember him. It was a great surprise to Scrooge, while listening to the moaning of the wind, and thinking what a solemn thing it was to move on through the lonely darkness over an unknown abyss, whose depths were secrets as profound as death. It was a great surprise to Scrooge, while thus engaged, to hear a hearty laugh. It was a greater surprise to Scrooge to recognize it as his own nephew's, and to find himself in a bright, dry, gleaming room, with the spirit standing smiling by his side and looking at the same nephew with approving affability. "Ha ha!" laughed Scrooge's nephew. "Ha ha ha! If you should happen, by an unlikely chance, to know a man more blessed in a laugh than Scrooge's nephew, all I can say is, I should like to know him too. Introduce him to me, and I'll cultivate his acquaintance." It is a fair, even-handed, noble adjustment of things, that while there is an infection in disease and sorrow, there is nothing in the world so irresistibly contagious as laughter and good humor. When Scrooge's nephew laughed in this way, holding his sides, rolling his head, and twisting his face into the most extravagant contortions, Scrooge's niece by marriage laughed as heartily as can be, and their assembled friends, being not a bit behindhand, roared out lustily, "Ha ha ha ha!" He said that Christmas was a humbug, as I live, cried Scrooge's nephew. He believed it too. More shame to him, Fred, said Scrooge's niece indignantly. Bless those women. They never do anything by halves. They are always in earnest. She was very pretty, exceedingly pretty, with a dimpled, surprised-looking capital face, a ripe little mouth that seemed made to be kissed, as no doubt it was, all kinds of good little dots on her chin that melted into one another when she laughed, and the sunniest pair of eyes you ever saw on any little creature's head. Altogether, she was what you would have called provoking, but satisfactory too. Oh, perfectly satisfactory. He's a comical fellow, said Scrooge's nephew. That's the truth. And not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offences carry their own punishment, and I have nothing to say against him. I am sure he's rich, Fred, hinted Scrooge's niece. At least you always tell me so. What of that, my dear? Said Scrooge's nephew. His wealth is of no use to him. He don't do any good with it. He don't make himself comfortable with it. He hasn't the satisfaction of thinking, that he is ever going to benefit us with it. I have no patience with him, observed Scrooge's niece. Scrooge's niece's sister and all other ladies expressed the same opinion. Oh, I have, said Scrooge's nephew. I am sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself, always. Here, he takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence? He don't lose much of a dinner. Indeed, I think he loses a very good dinner, interrupted Scrooge's niece. Everybody else has said the same, and they must be allowed to have some competent judges, because they had just had dinner, and with the dessert upon the table, were clustered around the fire by lamplight. He don't do any good with. Hmm? Well, I am very glad to hear it, said Scrooge's nephew, because I haven't any great faith in these young housekeepers. What do you say, Topper? Topper had clearly got his eye upon one of Scrooge's niece's sisters, for he answered that a bachelor was a wretched outcast who had no right to express an opinion on the subject, whereas Scrooge's niece's sister, the plump one with the lace tucker, not the one with the roses, blushed. Do go on, Fred, said Scrooge's niece, clapping her hand. He never finishes what he begins to say. He is such a ridiculous fellow. Scrooge's nephew revelled in another laugh, and as it was impossible to keep the infection off, though the plump sister tried hard to do it with aromatic vinegar, his example was unanimously followed. I was only going to say, said Scrooge's nephew, that the consequence of his taking a disliking to us and not making merry with us is, as I think, that he loses some pleasant moments, which could do him no harm. I am sure he loses pleasanter companions than he can find his own thoughts, either in his mouldy old office or his dusty chambers. I mean, to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not, for I pity him. He may rail at Christmas till he dies, but he can't help thinking better of it. I defy him. If he if he finds me going there in good temper year after year and saying, Uncle Scrooge, how are you? If it only puts him in the vein to leave his poor clerk £50, that's something. And I think I shook him yesterday. It was their turn to laugh now at the notion of his shaking Scrooge, but being thoroughly good-natured and not much caring what they laughed at, so that they laughed at any rate, he encouraged them in their merriment and passed the bottle joyously. After tea, they had some music, for they were a musical family and knew what they were about. When they sung a glee or catch, I can assure you, especially Topper, who could growl away in the bass like a good one, and never swell the large veins in his forehead or get rid of the face over it. Scrooge's niece played well upon the harp, and played among other tunes in simple little air, a mere nothing, you might learn to whistle it in 2 minutes, which had been familiar to the child who fetched Scrooge from the boarding school, as he had been reminded by the ghost of Christmas past. When this strain of music sounded, all the things that the ghost had shown him came upon his mind. He softened more and more, and thought that if he could have listened to it often years ago, he might have cultivated the kindness of life for his own happiness with his own hands, without resorting to the sexton's spade that buried Jacob Marley. But they didn't devote the whole evening to music. After a while, they played at forfeits, for it's a good to be childish sometimes, and never better than at Christmas. When its mighty founder was a child himself, stop. There was a first game at Blind Man's Bluff, of course there was, and I no more believe Topper was really blind than I believe he had eyes in his boots. My opinion is that it was a done thing between him and Scrooge's nephew, and that the ghost of Christmas Present knew it. The way he went after the plump sister in the lace tucker was an outrageous incredulity of the human nature, knocking down the fire irons, tumbling over chairs, bumping up against the piano, smothering himself among the curtains. Wherever she went, there he was. He always knew where the plump sister was. He wouldn't catch anybody else. If you had fallen up against him, as some of them did, and stood there, he would have made you faint of endeavoring to seize you, which would have been in the affront of your understanding, and would instantly have sidled off in the direction of the plump sister. She often cried out that it wasn't fair, and it really was not. But when at last he caught her, when, in spite of all her silken rustlings and her rapid flutterings past him, he got her into a corner whence there was no escape, then his conduct was most execrable, for his pretending not to know her, and his pretending that it was necessary to touch her headdress, and further to assure himself of her identity by pressing a certain ring upon her finger, and a certain chain around her neck, was vile, monstrous. No doubt she told him her opinion of it when, another blind man being in office, they were so confidential together behind the curtains. Scrooge's niece was not one of the blind men's bluff party, but it made comfortable with the large chair and the footstool in the snug corner where the ghost and Scrooge were close behind her. But she joined in forfeits, and loved her love to admiration with all the letters of the alphabet. Likewise, at the game of how, when, and where, she was very great, and to the secret joy of Scrooge's nephew, beat her sisters hollow, though they were sharp girls too, as Topper would have told you. There might have been 20 people there, young and old, but they all played, and so did Scrooge, for, wholly forgetting in the interest that he had what was going on, that his voice made no sound in their ears. He sometimes came out with his guesses quite too loud, and very often guessed right, too. For the sharpest needle, best Whitechapel, warranted not to cut in the eye, was not sharper than Scrooge, blunt as he took it in his head to be. The ghost was greatly pleased to find him in this mood, and looked upon him with such favor that he begged like a boy to be allowed to stay until the guest departed. But the spirit said could not be done. "Here's the new game," said Scrooge. "1 half-hour, spirit, only one." It was a game called Yes and No, where Scrooge's nephew had to think of something, and the rest must find out what. He only answering to their questions yes or no, as the case was. The brisk fire of the questioning to which he was exposed elicited from him that he was thinking of an animal, a living animal, rather a disagreeable animal, a savage animal, an animal that growled and grunted sometimes and talked sometimes, and lived in London, and walked about the streets, and wasn't made a show of, and wasn't led by anybody, and didn't live in a menagerie, and was never killed in a market, and was not a horse, or an ass, or a cow, or a bull, or a tiger, or a dog, or a pig, or a cat, or a bear. At every fresh question that was put to him, his nephew burst into a fresh roar of laughter, and was so inexpressibly tickled that he was obliged to get up off the sofa and stamp. At last the plump sister, falling into a similar state, cried out, "I have found it out. I know what it is, Fred. I know what it is." "What is it?" cried Fred. "It's your Uncle Scrooge." Which it certainly was. Admiration was the universal sentiment, though some objected to the reply to "Is it a bear?" ought to have been yes, insomuch as the answer in the negative was sufficient to have diverted their thoughts from Mr. Scrooge, supposing they had ever had a tendency that way. He has given us plenty of merriment, I am sure, said Fred, and it would be ungrateful not to drink to his health. Here is a glass of mulled wine ready to our hand the moment I say Uncle Scrooge. Well, Uncle Scrooge, they cried. A Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to the old man, wherever he is, said Scrooge's nephew. He wouldn't take it from me, but may he have, nevertheless, Uncle Scrooge. Uncle Scrooge had imperceptibly been become so gay and light of heart that he would have plunged the unconscious company in return, pledged the unconscious company in return, and thanked them in an inaudible speech, if the ghost had given him time. But the whole scene passed off in the breath of the last words spoken by his nephew, and he and the spirit were again upon their travels. Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. The spirit stood beside sick beds, and they were cheerful on foreign lands, and they were close at home. But struggling men, and they were patient in their greater hope by poverty, and it was rich. And almshouse, hospital, and jail, in misery's every refuge, where vain men in his little brief authority had not made fast the door, and barred the spirit out, he left his blessing, and taught Scrooge in precepts. It was a long night, if it were only a night, but Scrooge had his doubts of this, because the Christmas holiday appeared to be condensed into the space of time they passed together. It was strange, too, that while Scrooge remained unaltered in his outward form, the ghost grew older, clearly older. Scrooge had observed this change, but never spoke of it until they left the children's 12th night party, when, looking at the spirit as they stood together in an open place, he noticed that its hair was gray. "Are spirits' lives so short?" asked Scrooge. "My life is upon this globe is very brief," replied the ghost. "It ends tonight." "Tonight?" cried Scrooge. "Tonight at midnight. Hark, the time is drawing near." The chimes were ringing the 11:15 in the moment. "Forgive me if I'm not justified in what I asked," Scrooge, looking intently at the spirit's robe. "But I see something strange, and not belonging to yourself, protruding from your skirts. Is it a foot or a claw?" "It might be a claw, for the flesh there is upon it," was the spirit's sorrowful reply. "Look here." From the foldings of his robe it brought two children, wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at his feet and clung upon the outside of his garment. "Oh, man, look here! Look down here!" exclaimed the ghost. They were a boy and girl, yellow, meager, ragged, scowling, wolfish, but prostrate, too, in their humility. Where graceful youth should have filled their features out and touched them with its faintest tints, a stale and shriveled hand like that of age had pinched and twisted them, and pulled them into shreds where angels might have sat enthroned. Devils lurked and glared out menacingly. No change, no degradation, no preservation of humanity in any grade through all the mysteries of wonderful creation has monsters half so horrible and dread. Scrooge started back appalled, having them shown to him in this way. He tried to say that they were fine children, but the words choked themselves rather than be parties to a lie of such enormous magnitude. "Spirit, are they yours?" Scrooge could say no more. "They are man's," said the spirit, looking down upon them, "and they cling to me, appealing from their fathers. This boy is ignorance, this girl is want. Beware them both, and all their decree. But most of all beware this boy, for on his brow I see that written which is doom, unless the writing is erased. Deny it!" cried the spirit, stretching out his hand toward the city. "Slander those who tell it ye, admit it for your factitious purpose, and make it worse, and bide thy end." "Have they no refuge or resource?" cried Scrooge. "Are there no prisons?" said the spirit, turning on him for the last time with his own words. "Are there no workhouses?" The bell struck 12. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost and saw it not. As the last stroke ceased to vibrate, he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes beheld a solemn phantom, draped and hooded, coming like a mist along the ground toward him. Darker bunnies! I appreciate that. It's good to see you. 32 likes. Let's go. That was the end of the current chapter. We're about to hit that good old precious 3 hour mark. All right. Just making sure all is well. Oh, I appreciate that, Sean, but I get to sit in my good old gaming chair, and this has some pretty amazing back support, honestly. I should probably stand up for a stretch, but I really just have one question for all of you, because really this is for all of you. All right. This will be for you all to decide, because you all know I'm half a machine, so I hope I spelled that right. Oh, okay. Nope, I got it all right. And what I'll do is I'll go hit the last of this little coffee so I can do my little calisthenics here. And Kindle is finally at 100%. Mm. Hmm. I think I'm going to make myself some mashed taters tonight. That's what I think. I just wanted to come chill for a few. Good night, y'all. Good night, Kara. I appreciate you, fam, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your night. Sleep well. And yes, I was just thinking about dinner too. I will eat something for sure, Ernie. I've been eating like munching all day, so I certainly prepare when I come to read. So excellent. I love mashed potatoes. Of course, I think I just love potatoes, like prepared anyway. But I think my favorite preparation of potatoes would be au gratin. I love scalloped potatoes. Excellent. What are you making tonight, Sean? Baked potatoes. Okay. See? Let's go. All right. Wow. Are we really right up the middle there? Let's see. We got 16 people in. Got 12 votes. Got people saying yes. 42% yes, wrap it up. 58% finish it. 2 hours before bedtime, just finished dinner. Excellent. All right. I think we're going to finish it. I will say, based on my read counter, just so we're all aware, says there's about 40 minutes left in the book. So we're going to keep going so we can finish it tonight and see how Scrooge ends. I hope that you're all enjoying it. I don't think anybody else is throwing a vote on there. So we'll go ahead and end the poll. And we'll jump into this last little bit of the story. Baked potatoes and chicken, but I'm Irish, so I love potatoes in any form. Excellent. My grandmother used to really love the Irish heritage. I think there's definitely some Irish in me. But yeah, she used to make all kinds of potatoes. It was great. She used to make this mashed potato that she would make with horseradish and mix it all in, and it was the best mashed potatoes ever. I look forward to them every year. All right, let's see. Scrooge, turn a new leaf. The last of the spirits, stave 4. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came near him, Scrooge bent down upon his knee, for in the very air through which the spirit moved, it seemed to scatter gloom and misery. It was shrouded in a deep black garment, for which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible, save one outstretched hand. But for this it would have been difficult to detach its figure from the night, and separate it from the darkness by which it was surrounded. He felt that it was tall and stealthy when it came beside him, and that its mysterious presence filled him with a solemn dread. He knew no more, for the spirit neither spoke nor moved. "I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmases yet to come," said Scrooge. The spirit answered not, but pointed downward with his hand. "You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the time before us?" Scrooge pursued. "Is that so, spirit?" The upper portion of the garment was contracted for an instant in its folds, as if the spirit had inclined its head. That was the only answer he received. Although well used to ghostly company by this time, Scrooge feared the silent shape so much that his legs trembled beneath him, and he found that he could hardly stand when he prepared to follow it. The spirit paused a moment, as observing his condition and giving him time to recover. But Scrooge was all the worse for this. It thrilled him with a vague, uncertain horror to know that behind the dusky shroud there was ghostly eyes intently fixed upon him, while he, though he stretched his own to the utmost, could see nothing but the spectral hand and one great heap of black. "Ghost of the future," he exclaimed, "I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. But as I know your promise is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be another man from what I was, I am prepared to bear you company, and do it with me thankful heart. Will you not speak to me?" It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before him. "Lead on," said Scrooge. "Lead on. The night is waning fast, and it is precious time to me. I know. Lead on, spirit." The phantom moved away as it had come towards him. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which bore him up, he thought, and carried him along. They scarcely seemed to enter the city, for the city rather seemed to spring up about them and encompass them as of its own act. But there they were, in the heart of it, on 'change amongst the merchants, who hurled up and down and chinked the money in their pockets and conversed in groups and looked at each other's watches and trifled thoughtfully with their great gold seals and so forth, as Scrooge had seen them often. The spirit stopped beside one little knot of businessmen. Observing that that the hand was pointed to them, Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk. "No," said a great fat man with a monstrous chin. "I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead." "When did he die?" inquired another. "Last night, I believe." "Why, what was the matter with him?" asked a third, taking a vast quantity of snuff out of a very large snuff box. "I thought he'd never die." "God knows," said the first, with a yawn. "What has he done with his money?" asked the red-faced gentleman with a pendulous excrescence on the end of his nose that shook like the gills of a turkey cock. "I hadn't heard," said the man with a large chin, yawning again. "Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me, that's all I know." This pleasantry was received with a general laugh. "It's likely to be a very cheap funeral," said the same speaker, "for upon my life I don't know of anybody to go to it. Suppose we make up a party and volunteer?" "I don't mind going if a lunch is provided," observed a gentleman with the excretions on his nose. "But I must be fed if I make one." Another laugh. "Well, I am the most disinterested among you, after all," said the first speaker, "for I never wear black gloves and I never eat lunch. But I'll offer to go if anybody else will. When I come to think of it, I am not at all sure that I wasn't his most particular friend, for we used to stop and speak whenever we met. Bye bye." Speakers and listeners strolled away and mixed with other groups. Scrooge knew the men and looked toward the spirit of the explanation. For the explanation, the phantom glided on into the streets, its finger pointed to two persons meeting. Scrooge listened again, thinking that the explanation might lie here. He knew these men also perfectly. They were the men of business, very wealthy and of great importance. He had made a point always standing well in their esteem, in a business point of view, that is, strictly in a business point of view. "How are you?" said one. "How are you?" returned the other. "Well," said the first, "old Scratch has got his own at last, eh?" "So I'm told," returned the second. "Cold, isn't it?" "Seasonable for Christmas time. You're not a skater, I suppose?" "No, no, something else to think of. Good morning." Not another word. That was their meeting, their conversation, and their parting. Scrooge was at first inclined to be surprised that the spirit should attach importance to conversations apparently so trivial. But feeling assured that they must have some hidden purpose, he set himself to consider what it was likely to be. They could scarcely be supposed to have any bearing on the death of Jacob, his old partner, for that was past, and this ghost province was the future. This ghost's province was the future. Nor could he think of anyone immediately connected with him to whom he could apply them, but nothing doubting that to whomsoever they applied, they had some latent moral for his own improvement. He resolved to treasure up every word he heard and everything he saw, and especially to observe the shadow of himself when it appeared. For he had an expectation that the conduct of his future self would give him the clue he missed, and would render the solution of these riddles easy. He looked about in that very place for his own image, but another man stood in his accustomed corner, and though the clock pointed to his usual time of day for being there, he saw no likeness of himself among the multitudes that poured in through the porch. It gave him little surprise, however, for he had been revolving in his mind a change of life, and thought he had hoped to see a new-born resolutions carried out in this. Quiet and dark, beside him stood the phantom, with its outstretched hand. When he roused himself from his thoughtful quest, he fancied from the turn of a hand, and its situation in reference to him, that the unseen eyes were looking at him keenly. It made him shudder and feel very cold. They left the busy scene and went into an obscure part of town where Scrooge had never penetrated before, although he recognized its situation and its bad repute. The ways were foul and narrow, the shops and houses wretched, the people half naked, drunken, slipshod, ugly. Alleys and archways, like so many cesspools, disgorged their offences of smell and dirt and life upon the staggering streets, and the whole quarter reeked with crime, with filth and misery. Far in this den of infamous resort, there was a low-browed, beetling shop below the penthouse roof, where iron, old rags, bottles, bones, and greasy offal were bought. Upon the floor within were piled up heaps of rusty keys, nails, chains, hinges, files, scales, weights, and refuse iron of all sorts. Secrets that few would like to scrutinize were bred and hidden in mountains of unseemly rags, masses of corrupted fat, and sculptures of bone. Sitting in, among the wares he dealt in by a charcoal stove made of old bricks, was a gray-haired rascal, nearly 70 years of age, who had screened himself from the cold air without by the fussy curtaining of the miscellaneous tatters hung upon the line, and smoked his pipe in all the luxury of calm retirement. Scrooge and the Phantom came into the presence of this man, just as a woman with a heavy bundle slunk into the shop, but she had scarcely entered when another woman, seemingly laden, came in too. and she was closely followed by a man in faded black who was no less startled by the sight of them than they had been upon the recognition of each other. After a short period of blank astonishment in which the old man with the pipe had joined them, they all three burst into a laugh. "Let the chairwoman alone to be the first," cried she who entered first. "Let the laundress alone be the second, and let the undertaker's man alone to be the third. Look here, old Joe, here's a chance, if we hadn't all three met here without meaning it." "You couldn't have met in a better place," said old Joe, removing his pipe from his mouth. "Come into the parlor. You were made free of it long ago, you know, and the other two ain't strangers. Stop till I shut the door if the shop. Ah, how it squeaks! How it squeaks! There ain't such a rusty bit of metal in this place as all its own hinges, I believe, and I'm sure there's no such old bones here as mine. Ha ha! We're all suitable to our calling. We're all matched. Come into the parlor. Come into the parlor." The parlor was a space behind the old screen of rags. The old man raked the fire together with the old stair rod and having trimmed a smoky lamp, for it was night, with the stem of his pipe, put it in his mouth again. While he did this, the woman who had already spoken threw her bundle on the floor and sat down in a flaunting manner in a stool, crossing her elbows on her knees and looking into the bold defiance at the other two. "What odds, then? What odds, Mrs. Dilber?" said the woman. "Every person has a right to take care of themselves. He always did." "That's true indeed," said the laundress. "No man's more so." "Why, then, don't stand staring as if you were afraid, woman. Who's the wiser? We're not going to pick holes in each other's coats, I suppose." "No, indeed," said Mrs. Dilber. "And the men together? We should hope not." "Very well, then," cried the women. "That's enough. Who's the worse for the loss of few things like these? Not a dead man, I suppose." "No, indeed," said Mrs. Dilber, laughing. "If he wanted to keep him after he was dead, a wicked old screw," pursued the woman. "Why, wasn't he natural in his lifetime? If he had been, we'd have been somebody to look after him when he was stuck with death, instead of lying gasping out his last there alone by himself." "It's the truest word that ever was spoke," said Mrs. Dilber. "It's a judgment on him." "I wish it was a little heavier one," replied the woman, "and it should have been. You may depend on it, if I could have laid my hands on anything else. Open that bundle, old Joe, and let me know the value of it. Speak out plain. I'm not afraid to be the first, nor afraid for them to see it. We knew pretty well that we were helping ourselves before we met here, I believe. There's no sin. Open the bundle, Joe." But the gallantry of her friends would not follow of this, and the man in faded black, mounting the bench first, produced his plunder. It was not extensive. A seal or two, a pencil case, a pair of sleeve buttons, and a brooch of no great value were all. They were they were severally examined and appraised by old Joe, who chalked the sums he was disposed to give each upon the wall, and added them up into a total when he found that there was nothing more to come. "That's your account," said Joe, "and I wouldn't give another sixpence if I was to be boiled for not doing it. Who's next?" Mrs. Dilber was next. Sheets and towels and a little wearing apparel, two old-fashioned silver teaspoons, a pair of sugar tongs, and a few boots. Her account was stated on the wall in the same manner. "I always give too much to ladies. It's a weakness of mine, and that's the way I ruin myself," said old Joe. "That's your account. If you asked me for another penny and made it open question, I'd represent of being so liberal and knock off half a crown." "And now undo my bundle, Joe," said the first woman. Joe went down to his knees for a greater convenience of opening it, and having unfastened a great many knots, dragged out a large, heavy roll of some dark stuff. "What do you call this?" said Joe. "Bed curtains?" "Ah," returned the woman, laughing and leaning forward on her crossed arm. "Bed curtains." "I don't mean to say you took 'em down, rings and all, with him lying there," said Joe. "Yes, I do," replied the woman. "Why not?" "You were born to make your fortune," said Joe, "and you'll certainly do it." "I certainly sh- I certainly shan't hold my hand when I can't get anything in it by reaching out, for the sake of such a man as he was, I promise you, Joe," returned the woman coolly. "Don't drop that oil upon the blankets now." "His blankets?" asked Joe. Who else do you think? Replied the old woman. He isn't likely to take cold with him out, I dare say. I hope he didn't die of anything catching, eh? Said Joe, stopping in his work and looking up. Don't you be afraid of that, returned the woman. I ain't so fond of his company that I'd loiter about him for such things if he did. You may look through the shirt till your eyes ache, but you won't find a hole on it, nor a threadbare place. There's the best he had, and a fine one too. They'd have washed it if it hadn't been for me. Sorry, they would have wasted it if it hadn't been for me. What do you call wasting of it? Asked old Joe. Putting it on him to be buried in, to be sure, replied the woman with a laugh. Somebody was fool enough to do it, but I took it off again. If calico ain't good enough for such a purpose, it ain't good enough for anything. It's quite as becoming to the body. It can't look uglier than he did in that one. Scrooge listened to this dialogue in horror as they sat grouped about their spoil in the scanty light afforded by the old man's lamp. He viewed them with detestation, and disgust, which could hardly have been greater, though they had been obscene demons marketing the corpse itself. Ha ha! Laughed the same woman when old Joe produced a flannel bag with money in it, told out their several gains upon the ground. This is the end of it, you see. He frightened everyone away from him when he was alive, to profit us when he is dead. Spirit, said Scrooge, shuddering from head to foot. I see. The case of this unhappy man might be my own. My life tends that way now. Merciful heaven, what is this? He recoiled in terror, for the scene had changed, and now he almost touched a bed, a bare, uncurtained bed, on which, beneath a ragged sheet, there lay a something covered up, which, though it was dumb, announced itself in awful language. The room was very dark, too dark to be observed with any accuracy, though Scrooge glanced around in obedience and a secret impulse, anxious to know what kind of room it was. A pale light, rising in the outer air, fell straight upon the bed, and on it, plundered and bereft, unwatched, unwept, uncared for, was the body of this man. Scrooge glanced toward the phantom as its steady hand was pointed to the head. The cover was so carelessly adjusted that the slightest raising of it, the motion of the finger upon Scrooge's part, would have disclosed the face. He thought of it, felt how easy it would be to do, and longed to do it, but had no more power to withdraw the veil than to dismiss the spectre at his side. O cold, cold, rigid, dreadful death, set up thine altar here, and dress it with such terrors as thou hast at thy command, for this is thy dominion. But of the loved, reverend, and honored head, thou canst not turn one hair on thy dead purpose, or make one feature odious. It is not that the hand is heavy and will fall down when released. It is not that the heart and pulse are still, but that the hand was open, generous, and true. The heart brave, warm, and tender, and the pulse a man's. Strike, shadow, strike, and see his good deeds springing from the wound to sow the world of life immortal. No voice pronounced these words in Scrooge's ears, and yet he heard them. When he looked upon the bed, he thought, if this man could be raised up now, what would his foremost thoughts? Avarice, hard dealings, gripping cares. They have brought him to a rich end truly. He lay in a dark, empty house with not a man, a woman, or a child to say he was kind to me in this or that, and for this memory of one kind word I will be kind to him. A cat was tearing at the door, and there was a sound of gnawing rats beneath the hearthstone. What they wanted in the room of death, and why they were so restless and disturbed, Scrooge did not dare to think. Spirit, he said, this is a fearful place. I'm leaving it. I shall not leave this lesson. Trust me. Let us go. Still the ghost pointed with an unmoved finger to the head. I understand you, Scrooge returned, and I would do it if I could, but I have not the power, Spirit. I have not the power. Again it seemed to look upon him. If there is any person in town who feels emotion caused by this man's death, said Scrooge, quite agonized, show that person to me, Spirit, I beseech you. The phantom spread its dark robe before him for a moment like a wing, and withdrawing it, revealing a room by daylight where a mother and her children were. She was expecting someone, and with anxious eagerness, for she walked up and down the room, started at every sound, looked out from the window, glanced at the clock, tried, but in vain, to work with her needle, and could hardly bear the voice of the children at their play. At length the long-expected knock was heard. She hurried to the door and met her husband, a man whose face was careworn and depressed. Though he was young, there was a remarkable expression in it now, a kind of serious delight of which he felt ashamed, and which he struggled to repress. He sat down to the dinner that had been hoarding for him by the fire, and when she asked him faintly what news, which he not until after a long silence, he appeared embarrassed how to answer. "It is good." "Is it good," she said, "or bad?" To help him. "Bad," he answered. "We are quite ruined?" "No, there is hope yet, Caroline." "If he relents," she said, amazed. "There is. Nothing is past hope, if such a miracle has happened." "He is past relenting," said her husband. "He is dead." She was a mild and patient creature, if her face spoke truth. But she was thankful in her soul to hear it, and she said so, with clasped hands. She prayed forgiveness in the next moment, and was sorry, but the first was the emotion of her heart. "What the half-drunken woman whom I told you of last night said to me when I tried to see him and obtain a week's delay, and what I thought was a mere excuse to avoid me, turns out to have been quite true. He was not only very ill, but dying then. To whom will our debt be transferred? I don't know. But before that time we shall be ready with the money, and even though we were not, it would be bad fortune indeed for some so merciless a creditor and his successor. We may sleep tonight with light hearts, Caroline." Yes, soften it as they would, their hearts were lighter. The children's faces hushed and clustered round to hear what they so little understood, were brighter, and it was happier house for this man's death, and only emotion that the ghost could show him, caused by the event, was one of pleasure. "Let me see some tenderness connected with a death," said Scrooge, "or that dark chamber spirit which we left just now will be here forever present to me." The ghost conducted him through several streets familiar to his feet, and as they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but nowhere was he to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, the dwelling he had visited before, and found the mother and their children seated round the fire. Quiet, very quiet. A noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up at Peter, who had a book before him. The mother and her daughters were engaged in sewing, but surely they were very quiet. And he took a child and set him in the midst of them. Where had Scrooge heard these words before? He had not dreamed them, the boy must have read them out. As he and the spirit crossed that threshold, why did he not go on? The mother laid her work upon the table and put her hand up to her face. "The color hurts my eyes," she said. "The color? Ah, poor Tiny Tim." "They're better now again," said Cratchit's wife. "It makes them weak by candlelight, and I wouldn't show weak eyes to your father when he comes home. For the world, it must be near this time." "Past it, rather," Peter answered, shuttering up his book. "But I think he's walked a little slower than he used to, these last few evenings, mother." They were very quiet again. The last she said, and in a steady, cheerful voice that only faltered once, I have known him walk with Tiny Tim upon his shoulder, very fast indeed." "And so have I," cried Peter, "often." "And so have I," exclaimed another. So had all. "But he was very light to carry," she resumed, intent upon her work, "and his father loved him so, that it was no trouble, no trouble. And there is your father at the door." She hurried out to meet him, a little Bob in his comforter, and he had need of it. Poor fellow, came in. His tea was ready for him on the hob, and they all tried who should help him to it the most. Then the two young Cratchits got upon his knees and laid each child's little cheek against his face, as if they said, "Don't mind it, father, don't be grieved." Bob was very cheerful with them and spoke pleasantly to all the family. He looked at the work upon the table and praised the industry and speed of Mrs. Cratchit and the girls. They would be done long before Sunday, she said. Sunday? You went today, then, Robert, said his wife. Yes, my dear, returned Bob. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green the place is. How green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday. My little child, cried Bob. My little child. He broke down all at once. He couldn't help it. If he could have helped it. He and his child would have been farther apart, perhaps, than they were. He left the room and went upstairs into the room above, which was lighted cheerfully and hung with Christmas. There was a chair set close beside the child, and there were signs of someone having been there lately. Poor Bob sat down in it, and when he had thought a little and composed himself, he kissed the little face. He was reconciled to what had happened and went down again quite happy. They drew about the fire and talked, the girls and mother working still. Bob told them of the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew, whom he scarcely seen but once, and who, meeting him in the street that day and seeing that he looked just a little down, you know, said Bob, inquired what happened to distress him, on which, said Bob, for he was the pleasantest spoken gentleman you ever heard, I told him I'm heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit, he said, and heartily sorry for your good wife. By the by, how he ever knew that, I don't know. Knew what, my dear? Why, that you were a good wife, replied Bob. Everybody knows that, said Peter. Very well observed, my boy, cried Bob. I hope they do. Heartily sorry, he said. For your good wife. If I can be of service to you in any way, he said, giving me his card. This is where I live. Pray come to me. Now it wasn't, cried Bob, for the sake of anything that he might be able to do for us so much as for his kind way that this was quite delightful. It really seemed as if he had known our Tiny Tim and felt with us. I'm sure he's a good soul, said Mrs. Cratchit. You would be sure of it, my dear, returned Bob, if you saw and spoke to him. I shouldn't be at all surprised, mark what I say, if he got Peter a better situation. Only hear that, Peter, said Mrs. Cratchit. And then, cried one of the girls, Peter will be keeping company with someone and setting up for himself. Get along with you, retorted Peter, grinning. It's just as likely as not, said Bob. One of these days, though, there's plenty of time for that, my dear. But, however, and whatever, we're part of each other. I am sure we shall none of us forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we? Or this first parting that there is among us? Never, father, cried they all. And I know, said Bob, I know, my dears, that when we recollect how patient and how mild he was, although he was a little child, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves and forget poor Tiny Tim in doing it. No, never, father, they all cried again. I am very happy, said little Bob, I am very happy. Mrs. Cratchit kissed him, his daughters kissed him, the two young Cratchits kissed him, and Peter and himself shook hands. Spirit of Tiny Tim, thy childish essence was from God. Spectre, said Scrooge, something informs me that our parting moment is at hand. I know it, but I know not how. Tell me, what man was in whom we saw laying dead? The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him, as before. Though, at a different time, he thought. Indeed, there seemed no order in these latter visions, save that they were in the future, into the resorts of business men, but showed him not himself. Indeed, the spirit did not stay for anything, but went straight on, as to the end just how desired, until besought by Scrooge to tarry for a moment. This court, said Scrooge, through which we hurry now, is where my place of occupation is, and has been for a length of time. I see the house. Let me behold what I shall be in the days to come. The spirit stopped. The hand was pointed elsewhere. The house is yonder, Scrooge exclaimed. Why do you point away? The inexorable finger underwent no change. Scrooge hastened to the window of his office and looked in. It was an office still, but not his. The furniture was not the same, and the figure in the chair was not himself. The phantom pointed as before. He joined it once again, and wondering why and whither he had gone, accompanied until they reached the iron gate. He paused to look around before entering. A churchyard here, then. The wretched man, whose name he had now learned, lay underneath the ground. It was a worthy place, well let in by houses, overrun by grass and weeds, and growth of vegetation's death, not life, choked up with too much burying, fat with repleted appetite, a worthy place. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. He advanced towards it, trembling. The phantom was exactly as it had been, and he dreaded that he saw new meaning in the solemn shape. "Before I draw nearer to that stone of which you point," said Scrooge, "answer me one question. Are these the shadows of things that will be, or are they only shadows of things that may be only?" Still the ghost pointed downward at the grave by which it stood. "Men's courses will foreshadow certain ends to which, if perceived in, they may be led," said Scrooge. "But if the course is to be departed from, and ends with change, say it thus with what you show me." The spirit was immovable as ever. Scrooge crept towards it, trembling as he went, and following the finger read upon the stone of the neglected grave his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. "I am that man who lay upon the bed?" he cried upon his knees. The finger pointed from grave to him and back again. "No, spirit. Oh, no, no." The finger was still there. "Spirit," he cried, tight clutching at his robe, "hear me. I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been but for this intercourse. Why show me this, if I am past all hope?" For the first time, the hand appeared to shake. "Good spirit," he pursued, as down upon the ground as he fell before it, "your nature intercedes for me. It pities me. Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life." The kind hand trembled. "I will honor Christmas in my heart. I will try to keep it all year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out my lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on the stone." In his agony, he caught the spectral hand and sought to free itself. But he was strong with his entreaty, and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him, holding up his hands in one last prayer to have his fate reversed. He saw an altercation in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down to a bedpost. Missions! Hope you're doing well, brother. It's good to see you. 33 likes. Let's go. Catching the tail end of A Christmas Carol, last chat. Well, we got one more, the end of it all. But that was the last ghost. Oh, it was not a scheduled box opening stream. Veterans Day stream. People were requesting ripping ships. Yep, saw the MUR Lucario. That was pretty sick this morning. Keep letting focus on quiet time. Excellent. Just lay down. Perfect. Excellent. I love that. Jessica Parker, it's good to see you. Oops, forgot to lay. Oh, no worries at all. Stafford is gaming and the boys are sleeping. Excellent. That's always a good thing. So there's only about 10 minutes left, y'all. I'm so sorry. Normally our reading streams are about 2.5 hours, but I wanted to get through the entirety of the story so we can get as many holiday stories and reading time as possible. So I appreciate your patience and hope that you are enjoying it. Still got 15 of you here. And yeah, let's finish it up with Stave 5, the end of it all. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. And the bed was his own, the room was his own, best in happiness of all. And time before him was his own to make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and the future, Scrooge repeated as he scrambled out of bed. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. O Jacob Marley! Heaven and Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees, O Jacob, on my knees. He was so flustered and so glowing with his good intentions that his broken voice would scarcely answer to his call. He had been sobbing violently in his conflict with the spirits, and his face was wet with tears. "They're not torn down," cried Scrooge, folding one of his bed curtains in his arms. "They're not torn down. Rings and all, they're here. I'm here. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be. I know they will." His hands were busy with his garments all the time, turning them inside out, putting them on upside down, tearing them, mislaying them, making them parties to every kind of extravagance. "I don't know what to do," cried Scrooge, laughing and crying at the same breath, and making a perfect laocoon of himself with his stockings. "I'm as light as a feather. I'm as happy as an angel. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. I'm as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. And Happy New Year to all the world. Hello there. Whoop, hello." He had frisked into the sitting room and was now standing there, perfectly winded. "There's a saucepan that the gruel was in," cried Scrooge, starting off again and frisking around the fireplace. "There's the door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. And there's the corner where the ghost of Christmas Present sat. And there's the window where I saw the wandering spirits. It's all right. It's all true. It's all happened. Ha ha!" Really, for a man who had been set out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh, and most illustrious laugh, and father of a long, long line of brilliant laughs. "I don't know what day of the month it is," said Scrooge. "I don't know how long it's been. I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Never mind. I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Hello! Whoop! Hello here!" He was checked in his transports by the churches ringing out by the lustiest peals he had ever heard. Clash, clang, hammer, ding dong, bell, bell, dong dong, hammer, clash, clang. Oh, glorious, glorious! Running to the window, he opened it, and he put out his head. No fog, no mist, clear, bright, jovial, stirring cold, cold piping for the blood to dance to. Golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet fresh air, merry bells. Oh, glorious, glorious! "What's today?" cried Scrooge, calling downward to a boy in Sunday clothes who perhaps had loitered in to look about him. "Eh?" returned the boy, with all his might of wonder. "What's today, my fine fellow?" said Scrooge. "Today?" replied the boy. "Why, it's Christmas!" "It's Christmas Day!" said Scrooge to himself. "I hadn't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like. Of course they can. Of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow." "Hello," returned the boy. "Do you know the poulterers on the next street, the next street but one at the corner?" Scrooge inquired. "I should hope so, I did," replied the lad. "An intelligent boy," said Scrooge. "A remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there?" "Not the little prize turkey, the big one." "What, the one as big as me?" returned the boy. "What a delightful boy," said Scrooge. "It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my buck." "It's hanging there now," replied the boy. "Is it? We'll go and buy it." "Walker," exclaimed the boy. "No, no," said Scrooge. "I'm in earnest. Go and buy it. And tell him to bring it here, that I may give them the direction where to take it. Come back with the man, and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown." The boy was off like a shot. He must have had a steady hand at the trigger who could have shot off half as fast. "I'll send it to Bob Cratchit," whispered Scrooge, rubbing his hands and splitting with a laugh. "He shan't know what to send it. He shan't know who sent it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim. Joe Miller never made such a joke as sending it to Bob's Wilby." The hand in which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but write it he did, somehow, and went down the stairs to open the street door, ready for the coming of the poulterer's man. As he stood there, waiting his arrival, the knocker caught his eye. "Uh, I shall I shall love it as long as I live," cried Scrooge, patting it with his hands. "I scarcely ever looked at it before. What an honest expression it has on its face. It's a wonderful knocker. Here's the turkey. Hello, whoop, how are you? Merry Christmas." It was a turkey. He never could have stood upon his legs, that bird. He would have snapped 'em off in short within a minute like sticks of sealing wax. Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town, said Scrooge. You must have a cab. The chuckle from which he had said this, and the chuckle from which he had paid for the turkey, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle with which he recompensed the boy, were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down breathless in his chair again and chuckled till he cried. Shaving was not an easy task, for his hand continued to shake very much, and shaving requires attention, even when you don't dance while you are at it. But if he had cut the end of his nose off, it would have been a piece of, he would have put a piece of sticking plaster over it, and been quite satisfied. He dressed himself all the best, and at last got out into the streets. The people were by this time pouring forth, as they had seen him with the ghost of Christmas present, and walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge regarded everyone with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 or 4 good-natured humor fellows said, "Good morning, sir, and Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge said often afterwards that of all the blithe sounds he had ever heard, those were the blithest to his ears. He had not gone far when, coming on towards him, he beheld the portly gentleman who had walked in on his counting-house the day before, and said, "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe?" It set a pang across his heart to think how this old gentleman would look upon him when they met. But he knew what path they lay straight before him, and he took it. "My dear sir," said Scrooge, quickening his pace and taking the old gentleman by both hands, "how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. Merry Christmas to you, sir." "Mr. Scrooge?" "Yes," said Scrooge, "that's my name, and I fear I may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon. And will you have the goodness—" Here Scrooge whispered in his ear. "Lord bless me!" cried the gentleman, as if his breath were gone. "My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious?" "If you please," said Scrooge. "Not a farthing less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favor?" "You, my dear sir," said the other, shaking hands with him, "I don't know what to say. So much money. Don't say anything, please," retorted Scrooge. "Come see me. Will you come see me?" "I will," cried the gentleman, and it was clear he meant to do it. "Thank ye," said Scrooge. "I am much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. Bless you." He went to church, he walked about the streets, he watched the people hurrying to and fro, and patted children on the head, and questioned beggars, and looked down into the kitchens of the houses and up to the windows, and found that everything could yield him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk, that anything, could give him so much happiness. In that afternoon he turned his steps towards his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock, but he made a dash, and he did it. "Is your master at home, my dear?" said Scrooge to the girl. Nice girl, very. "Yes, sir." "Where is he, my love?" said Scrooge. "He's in the dining room, sir, along with mistress. I'll show you upstairs, if you please." "Thank ye, he knows me," said Scrooge, with a hand already at the dining room lock. "I'll go in here, my dear." He turned it gently, and sidled his face in round the corner. They were looking at the table, which was spread out in great array, for these young housekeepers are always nervous on such points, and like to see that everything is right. "Fred!" said Scrooge. Dear heart alive, how his niece in marriage started, Scrooge had forgotten for the moment about her sitting in the corner with the footstool, or he would have done it on any account. "Why, bless my soul!" cried Fred. "Who's that?" "It's I, your Uncle Scrooge. I've come for dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?" "Let him in? It is a mercy he didn't shake him off his arm. He was at home in 5 minutes. Nothing could be heartier. His niece looked just the same. So did Topper when he came. So did the plump sister when she came, and so did everyone when they came. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful unanimity, wonderful happiness. But he was early at the office next morning. Oh, he was early there, if he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit's coming late. That was the thing that he had set his heart upon. And he did it. Yes, he did it. The clock struck 9. No Bob. Quarter past. No Bob. He was full 18 minutes and a half behind time. Scrooge sat with his door wide open, that he might see him come into the tank. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on the stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock. "Hello," growled Scrooge in his accustomed voice, as near as he could feign it. "What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?" "I'm very sorry, sir," said Bob. "I am behind my time." "You are?" repeated Scrooge. "Yes, I think you are. Step this way, if you please." "It's only once a year, sir," pleaded Bob, appearing from the tank. "It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday." "Now, I'll tell you what, my friend," said Scrooge. "I'm not going to stand this sort of thing any longer, and therefore," he continued, leaping from his stool and giving Bob such a dig in the waistcoat that he staggered back into the tank again, "and therefore I am about to raise your salary." Bob trembled and got a little nearer to the ruler. He had a momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down with it, holding him, and calling to the people of the court to help him in a strait waistcoat. "A Merry Christmas, Bob," said Scrooge in an earnestness that could not be mistaken, as he clapped him on the back. "A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon." Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became a good friend as old a master, and as good a man as good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough. In the good old world, some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe. For good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the onset, and knowing that such as these would blind away, and thought it quite as well as they should wrinkle up their eyes and grins as they had malady of less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. He had no further intercourse with spirits, but lived upon total abstinence principle. And afterward, as it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well if any man alive proposed the knowledge, may that be truly said of us and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. The end. Little Stafford went to sleep listening to the story. Aw. The description of that morning after his awakening is something else, right? What a good ending, right? It's such a good ending. Definitely came about. Yep, came about, turned a new leaf. I just love when he shows up to his nephew's house and then the whole kind of trying to punk Bob Cratchit of what are you showing up late for? And then raising his salary and helping Tiny Tim. Although that's the first time I heard that Tiny Tim became a twice father and a good friend of old Mr. Scrooge. And I think we're going to be reading a lot more of the Charles Dickens too. Well done. Love that story. What a good ending. I appreciate you guys so much for that. Not many people can or should listen to me talk for almost 4 hours straight. And just to know that that's all I was doing was reading to all of you, it just warms my heart. Mr. Mishans, I hope you were doing amazing, sir. Hi-oh. Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite stories too. Like hands down one of my favorite stories. Hungry Hollow, how are you doing? Just catching us at the end as we're fixing to wrap up. I'm just going to go ahead and put in I like how you change your voice for every character. I really try to, because sometimes, especially with Dickens, it'll just be an entire page between two people talking back and forth. And It's one of my personal pet peeves in literature to put like, "Oh no," he said. "What now?" she said. "I don't know," he replied. "Okay," she retorted. It's like, well, the way that you read it, it should imply that they're having a conversation. We always don't need to know which way it's going. So, live audiobook was amazing. I appreciate that, Mishins. Christmas Story live, and it was great play to see. Excellent. I love that. Yeah, I definitely do try. And watching the movie helped because if you do watch the Scrooge movie with Albert Finney, I tried my best to emulate his voice and throughout that movie. He was very just old and talked out of the side of his mouth and very like, "Oh, what then?" But the one thing I was missing from all of this was all the music. And there's a song that the Ghost of Christmas Present sings with him called "I Like Life." Jay's Corner it is. We can do that. Yeah, let's go raid Jay's Corner. Still got 9 of y'all in here. Looks like your like book is done. Boop. Passed out. But yeah, let me get that set up right now. And he would start by saying, "Come on, Scrooge, say it. I like life. Go on." And Scrooge is like, "I like life. Good. Life likes me. Life likes me. Good, good. Life and I fairly fully agree. Eating food, drinking wine. Thinking of the good Lord defines me. I like pouring the wine, and why not? Life's a journey that I deny not." And now that song will be stuck in my head for 6 weeks. So, but that's the song my son and my father will always sing together. Broadway show win. What's the next live audiobook? That is a good question, and I think I would like all of you to decide that for me. I will find the ones in public domain that are up, but we can slowly work away. They don't have to be ghost stories, y'all. It's just a common coincidence that these also had ghosts in it. But yeah, we can definitely move our way into other holiday books. Wonderful recap. Oh, thank you guys so much. You guys are incredible. And you're very welcome. Thank you all so much for being here. And yeah, we will absolutely get into some other holiday stories. And they don't have to be Christmas holiday, they can be any holiday because the world is an amazing place and we should all be so lucky as to read stories from around the world and not just ones we're used to. I've been very curious because, granted, Charles Dickens, that kind of was done way back in the day in Europe, England, London is where that was based. So, um, but I would be very curious to know if they have other like storied traditions of holidays and in other cultures. I'm very fascinated by that. What's my favorite book? Ooh, that's a good question, Mrs. 5150. Hey Kevin, if you would have to choose a Pokemon for my ghost emote, what would it be? That is a good question. I would have to say Mimikyu, only simply because I see a lot of Gengar emotes out there and not enough Mimikyu emotes, so I would have to say my boy Mimikyu, as it is also a subtle reminder. If I were to ever get a tattoo Pokemon, it would be Mimikyu, but I just always thought it very something humbling about, something presumably ugly or scary trying to be liked by everybody and putting on the hood of the most liked Pokemon. And it's also a reminder that you can only take people at face value. Never judge a book by its cover, but don't trust blindly either. So that's why I mimic you. Krampus. I love Krampus. I could read Krampus. You guys want to hear the story of Krampus? 37 likes is crazy for a reading stream, y'all. Especially on a Monday. I know we have been going for a little bit. That would be great. I'll look into it. I'll look into it and see if the story of Krampus 1 has been translated to English, 2 has been in the public domain, and 3 it's not going to terrify anybody of the younger audience, if you catch my drift. But yes, we will absolutely do that. On the recommendation from Sean Bowden, it seems our boy Jay's Corner is on right now. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up the stream so I can grab some dinner. And we're going to go and hang out at Jay's Corner. TCG. Ooh, another good Christmas story. Well, a lot of the Christmas stories that we do know of and are common around this time are centered primarily around the religion of Christianity, like the gift of the Magi and the likes. The Grinch, but that's not public domain. I wish anything Dr. Seuss was in the public domain. I would Seuss it up all day on this thread. You know who else isn't is Shel Silverstein, and I would love to read his works too. The Grinch is great. Hmm. Maybe what I'll do is sometime this month or next month, we should have a members only stream where we write our own Christmas story. And it can be scary, it can be spooky, it can be about a central figure or antagonist that we can make into one thing and we can give them a funny name and Seuss it up ourselves. Green eggs and ham. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them, Sam. I am. But would you eat them with a fox? Would you eat them in a box? I would not, could not with a fox. I would not, could not in a box. I will not eat them here or there. I will not eat them anywhere. But perhaps, could you, would you, in a house? Would you, could you, with a mouse? I would not, could not in a house with a mouse, with a box on a fox. All right. So before I get copyrighted by the Seuss Corporation, because they will come for me. Memory of an elephant. Oh, that's nothing. I remember one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish, black fish, blue fish, old fish, new fish. This one has a little star. This one has a little car. Given some good life lessons. If you have green eggs, you probably should not eat them. Exactly. Probably not. Until he did and realized they were the greatest thing. The foot book. Spin bars. That's something I wish I could do too. I love rap. I love poetry, as always. And freestyling is something that I used to do as a hobby as a kid in Detroit. The space one is a cool one. Hop on Pop is a cool one. The places you'll go. It's opener here in the wide open air. We need a freestyle stream. Maybe. I'm going to put a maybe on that one. I'm going to put a maybe because typically freestyling, you like to work off of people and the energy of people. And maybe we'll try something like that. I have a few members only stream. So, have you ever read Touching Spirit Bear? I have not. I have not read that. I'm going to write it down. Touching Spirit Bear. I have not, but I don't know why Spirit Bear made me think of that story of Kuekuatsu. But that's just a crazy made up story from the movie The Wolverine. But it's still one of my favorite little made up stories about the Wolverine that got tricked to come to Earth to get flowers for the moon by the trickster who wanted the moon for himself. And so, although he could always see the moon, they could never be together again, because once you leave the dream world, you cannot re-enter. Mm-hmm. Kuekuatsu, the Wolverine. So when you say steel elephant or steel trap, Mishins, you're not wrong. Like I can remember any kind of book or speech that I really, really enjoyed, I will hold on to it. That's the one I'm talking about. The Marvel character Wolverine. No moon. Exactly. But y'all, you really make these streams so much fun. And we are going to continue to have fun with these streams also. Can't believe there's still 20 people here. The book's over. But we're going to bring our Mighty Ghost fam on over to Jay's Corner. I do want to remind you all to always go out and get everything that you set out to get. Ooh, we're going to end this a little differently. In the words of the Lorax, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. Everybody, love you so much. Thank you for being here. Let's go raid Jay's Corner and give him a good old Pokey Ghost raid. And y'all, thank you so much for believing in ghosts. And I will see you on Thursday. Peace, love, and Pokemon. Let's go.